Good evening. Let's start. Could you call the roll, Mrs. Nidak, please?
Nancy Kupka.
Here.
Mike Davenport.
Here.
Sherelle Fuller.
Here.
Dan Nicholas.
Here.
Terry Pavicic.
Here.
Rick Pavanato.
Here.
Zoe Boyd. Here. Sam Bull.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Sherelle will be, not Sherelle. Joanna will be joining us a little bit late. Let's stand for the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, let's start with we need a motion to approve the minutes for the February 22nd, oh, excuse me. Do you want to do roll call? Oh, we did it, I'm sorry. Joanna walked in and I just had a moment there.
I made it.
Okay, we need a motion for approval of the February 22nd, 2021 business meeting and the March 1st, 2021 workshop meeting minutes.
So moved.
Joanna and Terry.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Present. I
Thank you.
I'm back there.
That too. Terry Pavicic.
Aye.
Rick Pavanato.
Aye.
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Sherelle Fuller.
Aye.
Dan Nicholas.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye, the minutes are approved. We'll move to the first reception of visitors. The meeting agenda includes 2 opportunities for comments from the audience. The first reception of visitors is intended for audience members to address the board about any agenda item on which the board will vote. The second reception of visitors is intended for audience members to address the board on any topic pertaining to Community High School District 99. Comments are limited to 3 minutes to provide all visitors equal opportunity to address the board. If you need more time, we'll ask you to submit your thoughts in writing to the board secretary, Mrs. Nidak. Visitors addressing the board need to come to the microphone and state their full name. The proceedings are being tape recorded for the purpose of producing accurate meeting minutes, and they are being streamed live. I reserve the right to modify these protocols if circumstances warrant. Audience observation of these protocols is appreciated. Would anybody like to address the board? Come on up.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Kevin Custer, and I'm a resident here of Downers Grove. My son attends Downers Grove North. I sent a letter to all the board members today stating my position that the school should be back full-time. I would like a copy of that to be submitted into the records, since I'm not going to waste my time to read it here today. In doctor's response, he said that we were not going back full-time. I'm sorry, I don't know, otherwise I would. He said that we're not going back full-time because we couldn't meet lunch. I'm sorry, what you called it, lunch protocols? My question is, if we can't meet lunch protocols, and that is the only gauge to which we are not going back full-time, why can't modifications be made to accommodate the 6-foot distancing that needs to happen in order to get kids back full-time? It's an absolute travesty what is happening to these children. The mental health and the struggles that they're having is terrible. The science dictates that this is not a super spreader. It's the safest place for these children to be back. I cannot understand for the life of me how Catholic and private schools can be back in session full-time since the fall, and District 99 cannot do that. With the resources and the talent that we have available to us, the fact that that has not been accomplished and continues to this day is a travesty. Our children are paying for this. They will continue to pay for this. Each one of you have a fiduciary duty to these children to look out for them, for their best interests. That includes mental health. That includes reaching and attaining social engagement goals, participating, interacting. It is not happening. The ramifications for your decisions to continue this, these children will pay for it and will continue to pay for it. I'm asking each and every one of you to do everything that you can. And if you're telling me that the only thing that's preventing us from going back to school full time is 6 feet of separation for lunch, surely we have enough talent in here and enough will to solve that problem. There has to be. I know you're all compassionate people. I know you chose to serve because you care. I do not dismiss that at all. We are failing. We are failing as a community. We need to put a stop to it. Can you answer me why we cannot meet the 6-foot protocol for lunch to get these children back full time?
This is a reception of visitors. It's not a dialogue, so we don't exchange during this time. This is your opportunity to share your thoughts with the board. And
Okay.
then I'm happy to respond. I already responded to you once today. If you
And I
followed
appreciate
up,
that.
I'll be happy to follow up via email or a meeting or a phone call.
I would appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And this is going to be covered as well in the presentation.
Yeah,
Which will be
I mean,
momentarily.
that's the core of the presentation tonight is on it.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Okay, hearing none, we'll move.
We've received
Thank you.
online comments which have been shared with the board in advance. Since tonight is an action item, the board has had access to all of the comments that have come in. We've received 29 comments. The majority of those comments have been in favor of expanding the day to being more similar to the schedule before COVID. Although there's a mix in the comments of questions and those that support the current plan, but you know, overall, the overall tenor of the 29 comments would be to return back to pre-COVID type schedule. All of those comments become part of the board minutes after the meeting tonight. All right. Okay, getting into the key topic of the night and the information that went out to families earlier today. As the board knows, a little over a week ago, we received, well, less than a week ago, we received the guidelines from IDPH. A few weeks ago, we received the guidelines from the CDC that impact our planning for a full in-person return. So what I'll go through tonight is kind of what got us here and what our plans are for the remainder of this school year, and talk about some of our opportunities and limitations moving forward. So that guidance that was released, we had originally heard that it might be coming in January, and then February, and then finally was released in March. Just so that the board and the public are aware, no educators were privy to this information in advance. We received it in the same timeline as the public. So I know a lot of people are frustrated that, like, we should have had a plan ready already, but you know, we received the guidance on the 9th at the same time as everybody else, and there was drastic changes in this guidance in comparison to what we had seen before. The board and the public also know that we began working based on that CDC guidance, including forming a task force and bringing people in and starting to move forward. However, the IDPH guidance supersedes the CDC guidance, and the CDC indicates that in their guidance, that state and local guidance supersede the CDC guidance. So there's some real key changes in here that are quite different from the guidance that we've been looking at all year. The first one is that the community transmission metrics no longer apply for decision-making at the school level. The community metrics still apply for decision-making at the health department level. So where those community metrics could factor in is if we start to experience widespread illness at school or outbreaks at school, the health department would require us or ask us one way or the other to take an adaptive pause, which is typically 2 weeks. And then after those 2 weeks, we'd work with the health department to determine if it was safe to open. At that point, the health department may factor in community spread at that time. So the tracking of week-to-week metrics and those kinds of things are gone. Once we're back now after spring break in whatever plan that we're in, then we're back unless illness indicates that we should close for an adaptive pause. In the guidance, up to this point, the guidance from ISB and IDPH was that all students should be allowed to select remote. The new guidance says those with illness for themselves or a family member should be allowed to choose remote. So it changes that everybody can. However, the state has not provided us guidelines for the pathway of how somebody would prove that or what the indicators of illness would be for an individual or a family member. Therefore, at this point, it's prudent to just remain open for selection as we move through the spring. And then if these same guidelines exist in the fall, I would expect that we'll continue to get updated guidance. But let's just assume that nothing changes between now and the fall in the guidance. We expect that this kind of clarification and process will be coming. So our recommendation is that families still allow the choice through the end of the school year if they're remote or not.
Hey, Hank, before you move on, just a quick question.
Yep.
On the potential for an adaptive pause with the health department, is that automated if the health department says adaptive pause, that we're on adaptive pause, or is that something that we gather together and make the decision as a board whether or not we want to apply the adaptive pause?
No, it would depend. Okay, so there's no cut and dry. If there is a outbreak at a school, the health department has the authority to require us to go on an adaptive pause. However, they might work with us to make that determination as well. So it depends. So. All right, so they reinforce, as the CDC did, universal masking must continue. There's no longer the guidance about if social distancing cannot be maintained, because physical and social distancing changes here. So in the guidance we received last summer, the guidance said that if physical distancing cannot be maintained, a plastic barrier should be utilized. Mm-hmm. However, that's not listed now. So the idea of a face shield when physical distancing cannot be maintained now moves, we're recommending as part of this plan, the administration's recommending that face shields become an optional piece of protective equipment. So, you know, if a student wants to wear that, if a staff member wants to wear that, if they'd like to wear it during passing periods or on a bus or whatever, we have no problem with somebody that chooses to, but we're no longer recommending that it be required. Social distancing in learning settings changes from 6 feet down to 3 feet, except for times when face masks are removed for any kind of an eating situation, then 6 feet must be maintained. The capacity limits that we saw in the past, there's the arbitrary 50 per space is gone now, and it's now determined on the ability to maintain physical distancing, and there's different guidelines for outdoor events versus indoor events. And we're processing that and making changes where appropriate. The bus change, their limit now changes to 50. So that's a change as well. We believe we're going through all of our routes to ensure that we'll stay under that limit. So over the next couple of weeks, we're making sure that that's correct. And if we have to modify or change routes as a result, we will. Finally, even though the physical distancing remains the same or gets smaller, contact tracing remains the same. So if you remember, contact tracing is within 6 or more feet for 15 or more minutes in a 24-hour period. So this is critical as we build our plan moving forward, because there's real potential now in a classroom for students to spend a good amount of time, like an entire class period, within 3 feet of one another, or within 6 feet of one another, down to 3 feet. So there's a greater potential for the need for contact tracing and greater potential of students quarantining as a result of that. So we anticipate far more students coming back to school, but we could end up with periods of time where far more students end up being remote if there's need for them to quarantine over that time. So even though I expect that the number of families, based on our surveys, choosing fully remote to go down, the number of students on a week-by-week basis in a remote setting could at times go up, all right? So it's this balance. So we can't just come back and assume that there will be very few students or no students in the need of remote learning settings, okay? And there's a slight change in there where a lot of the guidance that we saw before, you've seen 24 hours was the timeline for contact tracing. That's expanded to 48 in the newest guidance. Another key change is symptom checking. Before we had symptom checking at home, and if students or staff didn't symptom check at home, then we needed to check their symptoms at school. That's no longer the case. We encourage students to symptom check at home, and they'll have that slip of paper to help them remind what they're checking for. But then we have no requirement to check for that or follow up at school. The CDC has indicated that it's more likely that somebody would actually transmit COVID that way than protect somebody from it. Another key change, and I know a lot of people are interested in this change as we head into spring break, is there's some recommendations on travel. And they provide some recommendations of things that people should consider doing when they return from travel. But the DuPage County Health Department has told us all year it's far more essential that people follow the safety protocols when they're traveling or anywhere than worrying about these protocols when they return. You would follow these protocols when you return if you didn't follow safety protocols. As the health department points out, there's many areas around the country with lower rates of COVID than in DuPage County. It's not necessarily where you go, it's what you do while you're there. So if students and families travel and they follow the safety protocols, they could go about returning to school just like they would going to the grocery store in their neighborhood. However, if they travel and do not follow those safety protocols, then they recommend that students get tested upon return and quarantine for 7 days, or no test when they return and quarantine for 10 days. We won't be mandating any of that. We will be sharing with our families that the expectation is that you follow the safety protocols at all times, but if you do travel and don't do that, our expectation is that you follow the CDC guidelines. And then saliva screening will remain optional for any student, even if they were remote and they're coming back in person and would like to participate in the screening process. They may elect to do so through the rest of the school year, and totally optional for those that would like to participate. Once again, with the metrics change, none of the screening protocols have any impact on metrics because there are no metrics. Okay? Questions on any of that? All right. So the first thing that we did as the new guidance came out was to meet with the task force, and I'm not going to read this all to you. The board has received it. It's up there as a public document for everyone to see what the task force had coming out, but I'm going to call out a few key ones that are definitely aspects. We considered all of these as we built the plan we're going to share with you tonight, but there's some key ones that I think deserve calling out here. The first two are really key as we began working. The first one, designing a plan that creates opportunities for more students to return to school for more time each week while creating the best educational environment for all students. So that's what we were trying to do as we did our work. It's very difficult to do because right now in the time of COVID, almost everybody has a different opinion as to what that is, and how it works for their individual family is going to be very different than the family next door. So it's challenging times to design programming that works for everybody. It's nearly impossible to do at this point. The next point was brought up in all of the groups, but students continue to bring this up. This has been a theme all year from students, is please make the schedule consistent. That, you know, back and forth, changing schedules from week to week is very challenging to organize, to schedule things, to know what they're supposed to do each day. And then you can kind of read through the rest of them that are there. Continued concerns about lunch periods, whether or not people will follow safety protocols, concerns with extending the school day, and so making the day longer than it is right now, but then no time to eat or have, you know, concerns with lunch, not concerns with having snacks, and you're going to see that in the data I present later. Students shared with us that it's easier to learn concepts at school, but it's easier to take tests when you're at home. Kind of makes sense, because when you're at home, you have access to all of your resources. You know, the concerns about socialization, there's a lot of different reasons why students are choosing to be fully remote, and out of that task force came several people that didn't want anybody making assumptions from family to family as to why they were making those choices. And then this is a key one. The more that students return in person, the more students will want to return in person. So it's, you know, it kind of is a snowball rolling down a hill. As more students come back, more students are going to want to come back. So we want to try to build a program that gets the most students through the door, because that's going to encourage more students to come through the door. The administration has believed all year the best spot for our kids to learn is here, and we've tried to work through some challenging guidelines to make that happen, and we think that we have a plan that does that. Yes.
Can I ask you to go back 2 slides? I should have interrupted you, I'm sorry. The third bullet, block schedules tend to allow for more time for assessments, don't feel as rushed, blah, blah. However, fewer blocks in a day make it less likely for students to return consistently.
So they were talking about the current hybrid model where we only have 2 classes, that made it tough for students to consistently want to come to school, that they wanted to be there for a longer period of time, more blocks in a day.
Okay.
More
so they wanted
classes
more
in
than
a
2,
day.
I got it, thank you.
So just having 2 isn't enough to come, especially some students, one of those is a lunch period. So then you're coming for an academic class, and then you have a non-academic class. So then it doesn't make it like you want to get up and come out of bed when you're coming for just one academic course.
Thank you.
All right, so we did send out the surveys to get feedback from students, family, and staff, just as we have all year, to get the voice of all 3 of those groups. You can see the total number of responses that came in over the course of last week there. And this was the first question. So it's just important so you understand in the structuring of the survey, if a family or a student responded, no, I'm not coming back, I don't care what plan you put forward, I'm not coming back to in-person instruction, they answered the next question as to why they were not coming back, and then they were done with the survey, other than just open response, okay? So when we get into preferences for in-person options, remote students weren't weighing in on those in-person selections, okay? If they marked maybe or yes, then they did. They provided us feedback on the in-person options. So when you take a look at this, you'll see that when we talk to our students, about 80% of them or more are saying they're planning on coming back full in person.
And we're at like 33% now are currently remote.
Correct. Yeah, we have about a third remote and 2/3 in person, which outpaces most schools in the area. For students, I hit
Meaning we
families.
have fewer remotes, more remote students, or fewer.
We have fewer remote
Fewer.
students than most schools in the area. Yeah, high schools in the area. When we talk to families, it drops down to them saying 90% will return and 10% will stay remote. So there's a 10% swing in there between students and families. Now, it might not necessarily be the same families responding. You know, it could be any number of things there, right? So, but for our planning purposes, based on this, we are planning on going from 2/3 of our students here to 89 to 90% of our students here. So we have to factor that into our planning that, as we said before, bringing more students back will bring more students back. So as we factor this in, we have to think about school with more students here on a daily basis. For the students that are saying that they are staying fully remote, there is a wide variety of responses. And you can see from there what those first ones are the ones we gave them, but you can see other is a huge number. There's a lot of individual reasons why students are choosing to stay fully remote. And when we look at families, we see the same thing. That other column is huge. So it's just a wide variety of reasons, very individual from family to family, why that fully remote option is being chosen. So then one of the next questions that we asked about was eating at school, because building a schedule with a lunch period is much different than building a schedule without a lunch period, and how that works throughout the day. And as we look at this, you can see there's a big difference between the number of students that are comfortable eating lunch at school versus eating a snack at school. A lunch was defined as at least 20 minutes. You go to a common lunchroom. You have to sit 6 feet apart from one another, and then you would have a lunch, and then you would return back to your classroom. In comparison to that, a snack is the idea of 5 to 10 minutes. You'd leave your classroom and spread out in the hallway where you could get 6 feet apart, and then you'd go back into your classroom. So it isn't this full go to a cafeteria setting. It's just step out, have a quick snack. That might be in a hallway, that might be outside. But spread out and have a quick snack. Far more comfort in the snack idea than the lunch idea. When we look at families, we see a similar trend there. There's a little more comfort in lunch, but a big disparity between the idea of lunch and snacks. So in the models, we gave families 4 different models, and you'll see this in a second to look at, but you can see this lunch preference come through in the survey results around the model. So there was 4 options, 2 without a lunch, so an early release or a late arrival, no lunch options. Then there was a full day option that was block with a lunch. And the final option was make no changes, stay in the hybrid. So when we look at just the options that were full in-person options, the late arrival, early release are in a bucket because those are the no lunch options. And then the other model is with a lunch option. So when we look at just those groupings and what people responded, you can see the student result. Now, they might have been factoring in more than lunch than this. Let's be fair here, but looking at it, the no lunch options far outweigh the option with lunch. It is much stronger, though, amongst families, the family responses for having a school day with lunch present than any other group.
Hank, if you ask that student, do you want to get out of school early or go to school all day? What do you think they're going to pick? That's why the one with no lunch out at 1:30 is the most popular one with students. But parents, being the parent, are saying, no, you need to be in school all day.
No, that's very fair, Rick. But when we go back to are you comfortable having lunch at school, that's very clear there as well amongst both students and
With all our field houses or all the space we have, we don't have room to
Yeah, I'll get to all
Just
of
say-
that in lunch in a
just-
second,
Just
Rick.
cut it, like everybody eats lunch at the same time.
I'll get there in a second, Rick.
But I want to just to, maybe throw a counterpunch at what you're offering up there. I mean,
Can I get there with?
well, I don't want that to sit there. I mean, the idea that, that kids would just naturally choose to skip lunch and come home early if they could, I think is not something I'm willing to just accept outright. That's, there may be students that do that, but to diminish the results of this on that sort of assumption, I don't think is
Are
fair.
you around students all day long in the classroom environment?
What's that?
I said, are you around students all day long in the classroom?
You don't need to do that. You know that I'm
21
not.
years?
You know that I'm not.
So I'm just saying,
Uh-huh.
I've seen it, done
I-
it, lived it.
And I
talked it.
value what you're saying. Yeah, obviously. Okay. I mean, I think that it's relevant. All I'm saying is that it doesn't mean that this isn't still
No,
relevant.
but if most students, hey, I'd like to get out at 1:30 and go hang out with my friends, right? Go have lunch downtown.
I don't know that most students would say that. I don't know that. You're telling me that apparently you do.
I would put money on it. I would go to DraftKings and put money on it right now.
All right. Put it in your bracket. I get it. So.
The
I
only
will
thing
say
would
that
keep
in
mind-
comparison to a regular school day, right? In a regular school day, an hour of that school day would have been lunch and study. So the difference between a regular school day and this is 1 hour of class time, right? Between this model and what we would have had before, because the lunch study would have taken up an hour of that time, right? So to move everything around and make this work, you're going to see in order to make it work with transportation, all the moving pieces, that's how we end up at the 1:30.
I'm sorry, and I know you've got more to say, but Dan, did you want to say something?
No, I was just going to say about these numbers, make sure I understand them. When I look at that all, and you're showing roughly 73-ish% prefer schedule without lunch, but 2 of the 3 options were scheduled without lunch. So it's not like a statistical slam dunk that people want without lunch, because
No.
2 of the 3 choices, so 67% is the baseline, and you're only at 72, 73. So, yeah, there's a slight increase in
Correct.
people who want lunch, but I don't think it's overwhelming. I just kind of wanted to.
No, that's
point
fair.
that out.
Yeah, I'm just trying to represent the data
Yeah,
as it came.
no, that's great. I
Yeah,
just-
and that is a fair point.
It's just you look at those numbers, and it's 73 to
Yeah, I'll get into like
26.
all the options here
It
in a
looks
second,
bad.
so you can see how they kind of stack up against one another. All right, so once again, these were the 4 options. So late arrival, early release, block, and the hybrid model. This is how we represented it in the form so that people got a visual look at how these would kind of work.
Right.
And this is where, if we just go straight up top choice against all, or rank choice against all of the options that were presented, you can see it's different from each group, but you can see how that early release shows up in the top half in all of the groups. Okay?
When we say families, we're talking parents or other
Parent guardian.
guardians,
Yeah.
always. So, okay.
It's just with the variety of labels for the adult supervision, we tend to go with families to make sure we include everybody. All right, so this is how it kind of, how each of the choices shakes out by the options, okay? So you can see for students where their top choices come. Then for families, you can see there is a slight edge in that option with lunch, but it's not far above the option. So Dan, to your point,
Right.
it's not skewed that greatly. You know, it is definitely a preferred that it's the full day with lunch, but it's not that far above the other choice. And then for staff, if you take a look at the comments, you know, it's just one more change, right? So their selection was to stay in hybrid, although their resounding second choice was that if we needed to change, the early release would be the way to go. And if we group them all together, this is kind of how they come out if everything was equal. All right, so as we look through all the surveys, students and staff, of the choices of the full in person, so you take hybrid off the table, the top choices for students and staff were the early release. The top choice for parents was the full day with lunch. However, when we can expect 80 to 90% of students to return to in-person learning, there's some things we need to recognize. One, that's a much higher percentage than what we're seeing at other high schools in the area. So when we see other high schools in the area doing days with lunch plans, those are schools with 40, 50, 60% of students returning. Not, you know, we're already above that in the hybrid with more intending to return. So the logistical challenges of running a full school day with a lunch get far greater than what we see with some of our peers.
And we're under construction too.
Yes, and we are under construction too. We saw from the survey results there are concerns. There's documented concerns there amongst eating lunch at school amongst both students and families. And that concern is far greater from lunch than it is from snacks. And as I talked about before, remote families are choosing fully remote for a variety of reasons. There's no real clear reason.
Can we just,
Yes.
because you and I have talked about this, but I think Mike brought it up and this gentleman brought it up, because we talked about like opening up the auditorium for lunches.
I'll get there
Oh,
now.
you're getting there,
Sorry,
okay,
Nancy, I
excuse me.
couldn't hear you.
I'm
It's
getting
coming.
there. I'm getting there.
It's about opening up the auditoriums for lunch.
Oh, okay, all right.
All right, so programmatic considerations. So what we're talking about here, as you all know, this is what we released to everybody today, is that we follow these safety measures that are in place, and the proposal for the board today is to return on April 6th after spring break with a Tuesday through Friday full in-person schedule. So everybody's invited back every day, Tuesday through Friday, at a 1:30 release to avoid the lunch period. That involves a 10-minute snack break in the third block of the day. Wednesday and Thursday afternoons, we would offer virtual support. So similar to the resource period we have now, kind of in the middle of the day, we move that to the end of the day, 2 days a week. And then Monday, we'll go into detail on that, on both of these in a second. Monday is a recommendation right now that all 8 classes would meet remotely as they are now. Oh, that is a typo, for 40-minute periods, not 50-minute periods. Then this week, starting tomorrow, assuming the board approves of this proposal, we will send out a survey to everybody for them to let us know how they plan on returning after spring break. But unlike the selections we've made in the past, if somebody starts out remote and wants to come back, we'll allow them to come back. The goal is to get as many students back in person as we can. And T99, because we can work out lunches, it's just a much smaller setting, and how that works there, that we will return to a 5-day-a-week schedule in what their schedule was before COVID.
Hank, did that Monday, all 8 classes remote, where it says remote 50 minutes, did that go out to the public this way?
It did, but there's another slide where it's correct. This slide is the typo.
I'm just wondering what maybe it did.
In the description, it said 40.
Okay, all right, just
Yeah.
make sure that the students,
It's just a typo.
because they're
on the
looking at
slide.
this. I have one at home that's looking
No,
at
the
that.
paragraph that we sent them
Okay,
said 40.
it was 40, okay.
So I did have a question. The idea for Monday, I know you talk about the lunches, but being remote, is that also going to take into account kind of the cleaning of the school to make sure that we keep up with the necessarily safety cleaning?
No, our cleaning protocols we're able to do even if we were back in all 5 days.
Okay, I was just wondering, based on the fact that it's COVID, was anything like that taken into account? I don't
No,
know,
we're able
prior-
to do all
Okay.
of our cleaning.
Okay.
That's not a factor in.
Sam has a question.
Oh, yes, Sam.
Hello? Okay. Is there a visual somewhere in this presentation that shows what the Monday will look like?
Yeah, we're getting there.
Okay. All right.
So Hank, quick question. I know we either talked about it or we traded emails. I don't remember which this past week. We talked about still allowing a choice for remote. My only concern with that is if we do, which is a great thing, if we get 90% of the kids back, a traditional classroom is going to have 3 kids, 2 kids online, and 18 in the classroom. What's that experience like for the 2 kids by themselves at home versus requiring everybody back in the classroom? I mean, at 33%, it's a little, and now with the AB splits, it's a little bit different. It's a little more balanced for teaching. At an 80 or 90 I'm just worried about that those remote learners are really going to struggle with that model.
And as I indicated earlier, though, that's the amount that are opting into that. I expect that we're going to have students that, between quarantining or isolating because they're close contacts now, that they won't be choosing full remote, but will need to end up there for a period of time because of contact tracing. So we need to keep that program robust enough because we could have students in and out of it because of contact tracing.
Yeah, I just think that, it's human nature. If you've got 18 kids in front of you and you have 2 on the computer, where you're going to focus your time, not by any, I think we're going to have to really make a conscious effort either in those virtual support hours or somehow that we don't forget about those that have chosen to be back, especially if it is a 90-10 relationship. I'm a little worried about that.
And we've seen that the other direction now, because even though we have 2/3 of our students back, we have some classrooms with 16 students in it and some classrooms with 3, right? So in those settings, the teachers have had to make sure that the in-person students are getting the experience that they need while the majority of the students are remote. It's going to be just the opposite here. So it's going to be a lot for our teachers to have to juggle all this as it has been all year.
Is there any metrics or anything that would point us to be requiring 100% back in person?
No, without the medical exemptions?
Well, I mean, essentially, at what level?
Right.
Because ideally, we're 100% in school, ideally without this. At what point do we say that we're okay enough for that 100% back in school so we don't have to deal with the 10 to 15% that might feel or might get left out?
I would say coming into next school year, if we're still sitting where we are now, that would be the appropriate time. Because by then, both ISB will have their protocols for determining if somebody has a medical reason to be fully exempt, and then our attorneys will have the opportunity to vet that and make sure that we're doing that process appropriately. At this point, there's no clear guidance as to what would even qualify for that. So, we'd have to wait for that to be determined before you're working your way closer to the end of the school year at this point. And are we going to get to the point where it's 3 weeks, 4 weeks left in the school year and you're going to tell everybody you have to come back, no questions asked? At that point, I don't know, if it's worth it at that.
I just wanted to raise that concern.
Yeah, I appreciate your point, just the idea that there's probably some point at which, there's so few at home opting for that. There's probably a point at which you go, we need to, and hopefully this would be worked out over the summer, how to deal with all that.
Yeah, but we've been in that flux all year. Like I said, there are some classrooms where students and teachers alike have said there's not enough students here, what's the point of being in person, right?
Okay.
So this could flip and be the other way. It's our job to make sure that all students are getting served in either of those settings.
Hopefully with the increased participation, though, that seems to be indicated here, that we're starting to lean more towards.
And to the comment, more students encourages more students, and I think
Right.
that's
I think
probably
so.
going to.
Yeah, it'll snowball into.
Yeah.
Hank, in a given
Would be
year,
great.
prior to COVID, what percentage did we have of students who remained homebound, but
Right.
still received services from
It's
the
a
school?
very small number, very small number.
Going to come.
Under 2?
No, more than 2.
Under 5?
I couldn't speak to it, Rick.
I mean, there is a
And
population.
it ebbs and flows, especially with, when you factor in both physical and mental reasons for, mental health reasons
Right.
for someone to be homebound, it can fluctuate greatly.
But there is a percentage in a non-COVID year that
okay.
would
No,
remain
absolutely.
homebound the whole year.
Absolutely.
And it's not a small number. It's
No, it's a big number.
It's got
Yeah.
digits.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely
Yeah.
double
It's
digits.
got
And they
digits,
would have
zeros.
responded no. They would have responded no on the survey. That you would, they wouldn't be coming back no matter what.
No,
Yeah.
that's not, I'm not talking about the survey. I'm just trying to get a baseline for prior to COVID, how many students would be home anyway.
And it'd be really hard to say right now, Rick, because one of the big reasons that we are seeing for students wanting to stay home during COVID is related to anxiety and mental health. And so that's directly related to COVID being present in society. So that could naturally drive those
That
numbers
number's
up.
higher this year
Yeah.
because of COVID.
Yeah.
But take COVID out, there still is a number who struggle with
Oh,
the
there-
anxiety
absolutely.
of school
Yeah.
and need that homebound service provided.
Correct. We're always providing, whether they're homebound or hospitalized,
Right.
any number of those things,
Right.
we're providing resources to students learning in an alternative setting
Yeah.
than in every year. Yeah. Just that number I would anticipate would be higher this year and
I guess what I
probably
want to
next
get,
year.
even in a good year,
Yes.
without COVID, there is a percentage, a
Right.
Correct.
noticeable percentage that are not in school on a
Absolutely.
day-to-day basis because of situations.
Right.
Absolutely, every year. Yeah. Actually, the board has added resources over the years to make sure that we're
Yeah.
helping those students
have
and
to.
serving them appropriately.
Yes.
You have to.
All right. All right, so we've been through this, but I just, I wanted to get it on one slide. What were those key factors as we selected a model? So we keep saying get as many kids back as possible. We already have one of the highest in-person rates in the area, and I anticipate that more will choose to return this way. Lunch was a major factor in determining the schedule, and I'll get into all the variables, I think, on the next slide on lunch. But just to review, lunch is much different than when we think of lunch before. When we had kids talking about coming back to lunch periods, they're envisioning the socialization time that they had in the past. And that is not, if you look at the guidelines, what we're talking about in a lunch period. Okay? We're talking about 6 feet apart. We're talking about assigned seats. We're talking they're all facing in one direction. There's limited talking because they have their masks off. As I mentioned before, 37% of students, 27% of families are not comfortable with lunch at school. We talked about the preferences. And then other factors in this model are that feedback has strongly encouraged a consistent schedule throughout the week. So you'll see this factor in a couple of ways in the upcoming slides and how Monday and Tuesday and Friday fit together. So I'm going to get into the details, but I just want to give you these kind of overarching ideas that are going to set up these things.
And Hank, are you going to explain what lunch means?
Yeah.
Okay, so I won't ask my question.
Right here. So the slide you've all been waiting for, lunch. So we have decided administratively a common lunch is not a feasible option at this time. If we return in the spring, if we return in the fall under the exact same guidelines with the new commons and our outdoor eating spaces, that will be achievable. But right now, it's not. If we look at right now at South High, which is our biggest building, right now it has the smallest cafeteria space due to construction. It also does not have an auditorium due to construction. So there's very little area in the common lunchroom space to bring students in. Probably 220, 230 is our maximum under those safety guidelines of 6 feet apart, all facing one direction. If we were returning 80% of 2,800 students, start adding up the number of lunch periods when you take 220 at a time, you start to end up with 9 to 12 lunch periods, depending on how many return. In a regular school day, we have 6. So it gets to be very difficult to put students in spaces. And I've heard field house, gyms, those kinds of things, but those spaces are occupied by students returning for those curricular areas. Plus you have hygiene needs, you need to get food there, food allergies, you have a whole bunch of complex moving parts for if you do those things. I've heard people say put students in classrooms and eat. Then you still have the same supervision, hygiene, food allergy, supervision pieces that go into eating in those spaces as well. For all of those reasons, we're recommending for this spring that we just focus on getting students back to school, all students, inviting them back every day, working through the logistics of lunch. By removing lunch, you shorten the school day by 1 hour, naturally, because you remove that lunch study, as I mentioned earlier. That would put us at the end of the day at 2:30. However, that is the exact same time that the elementary schools are releasing their students. We need to do our bus runs either before or after they do. So that moves us back to the 1:30 point to make everything work, to get in the 4 block classes and make that all work and make it all run without a lunch period in place. I think I covered everything in here. Questions about the common lunch?
What's the
Actually, Mike,
detriment?
hold it. I
Oh, I'm
think
sorry.
Terry was first.
Okay. I understand that, we're not going to have lunch, but we're going to have snacks. Are those snacks things that people bring into the building? Or are we going to be servicing the snack ability, I guess, the food service, so that, a student can buy a snack? Is that part of the whole?
No, students would bring their own free or reduced lunch. We would have a process to provide that to them in advance, like they'd pick up their snacks for the week and then be able to bring them.
Okay, so they would bring an apple,
Correct.
I'm just throwing that
Right.
out there. Okay, now, we can do that because our students will be in,
I have a slide on snacks next.
I'm
So
sorry.
That's all right, that's all right. Let me
did.
cover lunch and then we'll get to snack in a second.
Mike, did you have a snack question?
I had a lunch question.
All right.
But I did.
So my lunch question was, what do we, if we're trying to weigh the pros and cons, right? What's the negative to not having lunch? I mean, it may seem like a obvious sort of question. but-
Then the huge negative is that it shortens the school day, right? If we had the lunch
But
period, then
it-
we could stay till 3:20.
But from an academic standpoint, curricular standpoint, what are we sacrificing by not having lunch?
I don't believe at this point that we're sacrificing much. I think that what we're looking at right now with the block schedule, and you're going to see in a second, there's 70-minute blocks. There's 70 minutes. We've heard consistently from students that 80 minutes is too long. They'd like to see those shorter. So we get the 4 70-minute blocks in a day that meets the instructional needs of students for that day, plus, then they go home and have their lunch period. Many school districts in Illinois, 4 70-minute blocks plus a lunch period is a full school day. Right? We have an unusually long school day for high schools in Illinois. I'm not saying it shouldn't be, and I like our schedule. I'm just saying that if you stack together lunch and 4 70-minute blocks, you're matching a lot of high schools in Illinois and across the country. So I don't think we're missing out on anything instructionally, especially when we add back in the resource time and we add back in the office hours the teachers have been offering individually to students all year. I think between all of those, we have all the mechanisms we need to end the school year strong academically.
Maybe, Rick, I don't know, maybe you want to speak to this, or?
I was going to wait till he got to the schedule and talk about the hybrid schedule. I was going to wait and
Okay.
ask
Thanks,
my
Rick.
questions then.
Okay, I was just,
When he
I,
gets to slide 29 and proposes the schedule.
Got it.
I'm gonna ask.
All right.
well, I know we've had commentary from the public in person and in view, via emails and such. A lot of people saying, hey, we need a normal day, and we need, we should be having lunch too. And if that's the only
Understand.
thing that's, and I'm trying to weigh this. If we're really not losing anything by not having lunch, but it makes more people feel comfortable about being here, then,
Yeah.
that seems to be the way to go, to me.
I think, what we are losing is obviously that full day, like what we used to have. But I've heard from folks that we're losing lunch, that social time the kids have each day. That's not what this is.
That's not what this is.
In times of COVID. Lunch is not a social period right now. It is, you go to your individual assigned spot, your little 6-foot box, you consume your lunch, and then you put your mask back on and go back to class. It isn't lunch like we think of lunch in high school, where it's this time where students get to be together and socialize and mix and kind of, blow off steam together, and that's not what this would be.
Hank, before COVID, what
Yeah.
was not counting resource
Yeah.
period, what was the lunch time? Because I think it was like 20-some minutes.
Yeah, it's just over 20
So
minutes.
why can't a full schedule where you shut everybody down for 22 minutes, which is 12 minutes longer than the snack period, they go to their spot to eat, and then they go to the rest of the classes the whole day like before, 8 classes?
I don't have somewhere to put them that I can have them all sit for that 22.
For 12 minutes
No, I
longer than the
don't,
10.
because when you look at, I need them to be in a spot that's cleaned, that is 6 feet apart from everywhere, that makes sure that that it's hygienic, that there's no chance of food allergies coming in contact with one another, that it's ready then for instructional space afterwards. It's more than 22 minutes that we're looking at to turn that space over and get it up and going.
No, just have air, with the snack break, the school's going to shut down for 10 minutes, right? It's not going to be a rolling snack
It will be.
break.
It'll be a rolling snack break.
Yeah.
Well, who's
It's a-
going to clean between the snack breaks then, under that scenario?
I'll get to snacks in a second. Questions on lunch?
So in the schedule that has lunch,
Yes.
we still, if I remember right, I don't have it in front of me, you're still only talking 4 blocks of classes that day.
Correct. Yes.
So with lunch or without lunch, it's still 4 classes a day.
Correct.
It's the same 4 classes, same amount of time, the only thing missing is lunch.
Correct.
Because as you said, lunch, essentially, if you're talking 6 feet apart, is like this.
Right.
It's kind of what we are here with another row 6 feet in front of you facing the same
all
way.
facing the same way. Yes.
Okay.
So what gets inserted in to make it a full day, in order to make those, we could make 6 lunch periods. If we could make 6 lunch periods work, we could run a full day block. And in there, in those 6 lunch, in the middle, in the 3rd period of the day, so let me go back. We need to go back quite a ways. Oop.
Right there.
See the option 3?
Yeah.
That's what the model would be. Okay, so it's still 4 blocks in the day. But in that 3rd block of the day, in order to make lunches stack up and everything work, you have the combined lunch and study hall in there. Depending on how you move periods and times around, you end up with, like, let's say you were doing an 80-minute day. You'd have an 80-minute block in your first class, 10-minute passing period, 80-minute block. Good morning. 80-minute passing period, 10-minute block. And then in that long class lunch study, classes would be breaking from one another to go have lunch at different times. So you might start in class, and then your whole class would go off to lunch for 20 or 30 minutes, right? Then your whole class would have to come back and be in a study hall in their own classroom to make all the times of all the classes line up, because you've got to fit all of these lunch periods inside that 3rd block. And then you would return to your actual instructional time within your class, so that that middle class didn't end up with 140 minutes and every other class is only getting 80 minutes of instruction. Because then as a teacher, that class and planning for it, as a student, that class and going through it are very different than all of the other classes you're in throughout the week.
And going back to an 8-class day with lunch wasn't one of the options. But that one, I'm assuming, is it feasible because of space, or?
Yeah, it's the same concept that we've gone back to. The idea of the block is that we don't have as many students mixing throughout the day, so there's less chance for close contacts. there's less opportunities for students to have to quarantine and to track illness and to spread illness. So the idea is limiting those cohorts throughout the day in the block. Chair?
I talked to you earlier that I like the option 3, but if, let's say, we could do option 3, how many lunch periods would be in that third block, and how many students would be in each one of those lunch periods? Because, you know, I guess I'm just thinking, what if we had a tent outside that they could go for just the lunch part, and then come back in for the students to have class? I mean, to me, that makes a lot of sense to have, you know, a huge tent. If there's 200 students that have to have lunch at every section of that, I mean, I'm just thinking outside the box, but
Sure.
it wouldn't be something that would be in the classroom for them to have food. It would be out, let's say in the parking lot, you know, put a big tent, you know, with tables.
I like that, but I guess, you know, our weather is so predictable here.
Well, that's why you have a tent with sides on it. You know, and by the time spring break gets here, hopefully, our weather will be moving in the better direction. I don't know, I'm just throwing that
I
out.
agree with you. My school is on block option 3 since I've been there, so probably longer than 21 years. They have 4 lunches that they cycle through that one period.
Right.
And they consider, like, science either gets lunch at the beginning or lunch at the end,
Right,
so you don't
right.
break up the class. But like math, English, history, the kids kind of like it because it breaks up 80 minutes of math or 80 minutes of English. They come in, they come out. How many periods would you need of lunch? Because we've got 4.
Yeah, if we did
And same size,
6.
same
if we-
population.
If we did 6 here, you're looking at 400 to 500 students per lunch period. The cafeteria only here will hold about 220. So you need to
I don't know
put
why
the
we
rest
couldn't
of
use
the
the field
students
house.
somewhere.
Oh, you can't eat in the field house?
With COVID, though.
No,
You
no,
can
no,
make
I mean,
exceptions.
even on a good day, because of the flooring situation.
Or the gym, pull the
The
bleachers
gym
back.
is,
Right, but there's students that are in the gym during
Gym
that
for lunch.
that
Right.
class.
Maybe they could do, maybe for 28 days, they could do something different. They
For-
could, the weather's
right.
nice, they could be outside, they could be in the football field.
For
they could be
28
inside.
days, that's why we're recommending this other schedule to make it work.
well, I'm just trying to get our students back as much as possible with the least amount of hassle. But, you know, even with this block, you're only doing half the classes anyway in option 3. So that's why I was asking, how many students does that mean? And how many lunch periods would you have to put in there to get them a lunch?
That's what, to fit them in the space that we currently have now, you need 9 to 12 lunch periods, depending on how many students choose to
I
come
mean,
back.
it looked, well, okay.
I don't know, it seems to me this is a period of COVID. We're interested in getting more instructional time. I don't know what the great benefit is to having lunch, other than maybe time that parents don't have to worry where their kids are. That to me seems like it. I think that we're spending too much time talking about fitting all these lunch periods. That seems like too many lunch periods to be having. I just don't think it's worth all this discussion on it. I frankly think that there is no great loss not to having lunch at school.
I guess the point of it, though, is if I get what you guys are saying, you're talking about getting the lunch in so you can get the school day longer. Is that your point?
Yeah, what's
Well,
the,
no, to make sure that, you know, right now we've got four class, and I'm focusing on option 3. You've got 4 class periods on, let's say, what is it, Tuesday, Thursday, and then 4 of those class periods on Monday and Wednesday.
Yeah, you'd be odds and evens,
And
you'd
you
go
get
back.
40 minutes more of instruction time.
Right.
Because
So
the
you're,
classes are 80 minutes versus 70 minutes.
right, so you're getting a lot of class time, but you've got to feed them. because, you know, there's no student that's going to be able to go from 8 o'clock in the morning until 3:30 in the
Well,
afternoon.
we feel like we need to give them a snack even to go to one.
Without,
Right.
right, without fuel. I mean, you know, let's face it, we don't want to be without fuel, so they shouldn't be without fuel.
Well, and some students have a 40-minute bus ride in and a 40-minute bus ride out on top of it.
Right, so that's even more time. So I guess what I'm saying is if we had a tent in the parking lot that would fit 200 students, you know, they're distancing in one way or another, couldn't we rotate those enough to get the half the students at one time? I don't know, I'm just,
We don't believe so, Terry. That the amount of space that you would need to make that happen is not realistic at this point in time.
okay, I'm just,
And just getting everybody to that space and back in and serving them meals, and then with the requirements of how the meals must be served and all of those pieces, we don't believe that the logistics for the number of students that we're looking at are feasible.
I got a question.
I believe that Sam has.
Somebody said, I want to be sure I understand. Someone said something about it gets 40 more minutes in the day. Who said that and what
I
are we
did,
saying?
because the block 3, the classes are 80 minutes versus 70 minutes on option 2. So you have more in-class instruction time. That's why the day goes to 3:20. You're picking up that 40 minutes in the class that gets cut in option 2.
Okay.
Correct.
Because it's the online supported option too. Okay.
Right.
So Hank, I'm not being confrontational here, I'm trying to understand in my mind. How do we get 10-minute lunches to work, or 10-minute snack break to work, but a 22-minute lunch break?
Can I get to my
Doesn't.
slide on snacks and then I'll
Okay,
walk through it.
it just doesn't seem like it's that different.
It is. It's very different.
Before we talk snacks, Joanna, you had a question.
No,
We're going to come back.
Sam had something to say.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sam. Oh, thank you.
I was just going to mention that the 10 extra minutes per class period that would be happening with the third schedule, I honestly think is next to worthless, just in terms of extra instruction time, especially if students are fully remote, and also being in person too, just because I think one of the principal complaints this entire year has been 80-minute periods. And I just think that after about an hour, 90% of students, their brains are just so tired that adding in that extra 10 minutes of instruction time, if that's a deciding factor for choosing block or Schedule 3 over any other one, I don't think that should be considered, because that extra 10 minutes is nowhere near as efficient.
Well, Sam, I think I was going to bring this up with the schedule. I've been teaching 21 years with the 80-minute class periods. Unfortunately, we just switched over, and we have not been able to provide teachers, I don't think, with a lot of support to help them adjust. Because my question when we got to the schedule was, Hank, before COVID, what was a typical class period? 45 minutes, 42 minutes, 47? What was it? Before COVID and all this?
50.
50. And so there's a different strategy in a 50-minute period than an 80-minute period that a teacher has to sense. And you're right, you can't lecture for straight through. You kill a kid, you bore him to death. But
Kill the instructor.
you can do other strategies to offset that. And I'm fortunate because I can do a lab. I can do a pre-lab, post-lab, and the lab in 80 minutes. AP, I can actually do a college-level lab because I've got 2 80-minute periods, which is 160. The math, they have to do different things. History has to do different things. English has to do different strategies. Unfortunately, our staff hasn't had that professional development yet because we just switched over.
Well,
I would
we've done
think-
some,
did you switch to?
while we're in here, but we've also had to switch multiple
Right.
schedules, and it's also different numbers of students showing up in person and remote, so there's a lot of
And
variables.
it takes years. It
Right.
takes a couple years to get used to teaching 80 minutes to a high school student than it does 50 minutes.
I'll agree with you, Rick, there are teachers that are just amazing at an 80-minute block, but you've done it, it's not easy. It's
No,
not
it
an
took me a
easy
couple
thing to
years
pull off.
figure it out.
And what Sam is reporting is what we do continue to hear from students, is shorten the 80-minute block, it's just too long.
But we're asking our teachers to teach in a format that they haven't had any experience to try.
Correct. It's their first year
It's their
trying to make it work. And I
Right.
think they're doing a great job with what they've been faced with. But yeah, it's tough.
Because it's a completely different ballgame,
Yes.
80 versus 50, at this level, not
Yes.
college, this level.
I can imagine, and I would think, we're talking about the student being exhausted, I would think it's exhausting too for an instructor to go at that pace. I mean, that's a long time to be on.
So I would just kind of piggyback onto all this. I think, the point that's just been made is reinforcing the idea that, trying to go through Herculean efforts to try to figure out a way to get lunch to work at school has very little benefit academically or curriculum. And so
Yeah.
I'm still at the same place. I don't, I'm not hearing a great argument for this is the huge benefit to having lunch.
And if I heard right, especially hearing from Sam, it doesn't, because we're trying to get that extra 40 minutes in based on a longer class period, we're saying that potentially is not even,
It's not something we want.
right, returning a good value, because at the end of the day, we should be still looking at that, then, yeah.
All right.
Snacks?
Let's talk about snacks.
That's snack,
Yeah, what'd you bring us, right?
right.
Yeah. What have I been waiting for?
Let's try that out.
All right, so snack breaks are a feasible option. Families have responded and students have responded that there's far fewer concerns about snacks. The way we described snacks was 5 to 10 minutes, stepping out into a common space, spreading 6 feet apart, removing your mask, and having a snack. We wouldn't require anybody to have a snack, and that's one of the things. If you build in a lunch period, the student has to go to the lunchroom because you need to take all of those kids out of a classroom and send them to eat because the teacher needs to eat at the same time. In a snack model, students could choose to hang out, stay in the classroom, not remove their mask, not participate in the snack break should they choose not to. They could just stay in their classroom, and students that wish to snack could step out, spread out, whether it's in a space like this, a hallway, step outside if they have outdoor access, those kinds of things, have a quick snack, and then return right back to class. We're trying to extend, I said beyond, but we're trying to get close to 5 hours, okay? Beyond 5 hours that they're with us, we're trying to get close to 5 hours of instructional time. In a year when there isn't COVID going on, that's the minimum threshold we're shooting for is 300 minutes of being at school. Counts for a 300 minutes of instruction counts as a full school day. So, this is the key difference, right, is you get the choice of whether you're participating or not. You just quickly step out for that 5 or 10 minutes. You clean your hands. We have hand sanitizer in every classroom. Clean your hands, step out, have a quick snack, return back into your class, and it would be rolling. So like the first 10 minutes of the classroom would be rooms with the end in the number 1. And then the next room would be, rooms that end in number 2, right? And you just kind of roll everybody out for this quick 10-minute snack, and then you're right back into your classroom and picking up where you were at. So it provides, that quick snack, because it is a long period of time, especially kids with long bus rides. But it's not the whole idea of having to go leave your classroom, walk to the other side of the building, perhaps, find your assigned seat, 6 feet apart from everybody, facing in a certain direction, eat your meal, and then we clean up that space for the next group that comes in, and then do it again, time and time again, for however many periods it takes to move the students through that space that we have, whether that's indoors, outdoors, whatever. All of those same protocols exist. It's much bigger in a lunch period than it would be in kind of this snack model. So finally, I made it through the snack slide.
But they would be able to eat their snack in their room. And it would be, like you said, rolling, so you'd have fewer people in the hallway. And then would there need to be any cleaning?
Correct, because there's no cleaning because they're not eating at a certain, the idea is that you step out and you have your stand and have your snack wherever you're at.
And there won't be students sitting there where they are.
Correct, right. The idea is that they're not eating in the classroom, they're kind of stepping out into this common, larger volume space and then coming
We
back.
need some more trash cans? And
Yeah, we'll probably need, receptacles and those kinds of things. We'll probably have to walk and sweep hallways and those kinds of things, but, I'm sure students are responsible. You ask them to clean up after themselves. They do a far better job with us than they do at home, so I have no concerns about that.
Clean up in aisle 6?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Could be a
So
little,
that's the idea of the snack break.
all right.
Questions on snack? All right, so this is that schedule. Now you'll see it's odds and evens like it is now, but what we do is push, you see the order is different than it's been all year because we're pushing the lunch periods to the beginning or end of the day so that students, when their lunch period comes up, they can either choose to stay here with us or some students have chosen a release at that point. So either option would be on the table depending on what families selected. Also in that time from 1:20 until the end of the day, we'll still continue to have our Connections and Access program, which are students that need to stay with us for the whole day. We're going to have some students that are involved in activities or athletics that can't get home and come back. We would allow them to stay here, have lunch, stay through the end of the day. We'll still have a good number of students that will be with us for the full day based on their needs. But that smaller number of students, we would be able to accommodate a lunch setting for, especially with all of the students, the majority of students leaving at that point. Then we can spread them out, we can supervise them, we can have an appropriate lunch setting, and those, in that for the smaller number of students that are here, it's just the large student body, the full student body, that making a lunch period and making it work and meeting all of those guidelines, to get back, like we keep saying, to get back that 40 minutes, which students are saying, we don't want that 40 minutes, because it hasn't been productive time, because it's long for them. We've heard that from them all year long. It just doesn't seem like it is worth that investment for those 28 days of the school year to pull this off this way. Now, if we were talking this was August, and we're talking about a full school year, and we're talking about how this is all going to work, and we have our common space here, and when we start putting up some outdoor eating areas and those kinds of things for the long term, and get seating and cleaning protocols and all of those kinds of things in place for the long haul, absolutely. I think that if we're coming back next year and it looks like that, that's what we're talking about doing. But our spaces will be completely different next fall than what we're looking at right now in the spring. Then we have that space to set up permanent spots for kids to spread out and have a meal here.
And the lessons learned. No matter what, we know we're going to be better at what we're doing later than what we are now, and just
I'm
continue to
assuming
improve.
guidelines will continue to adapt and change and those kinds of things.
If everything got going in a great way, when were you going to implement your new schedule that we talked about, I think, a while ago?
The one that was being proposed last year that we tabled because of all of this change? Yeah, it would have been for next school year, but with everything going on and all the different schedules and not knowing what comes next, that would have been a recommendation for next school year.
Is that still going to be tabled all through next year too?
Right now, that's the plan, yes.
And then what was the length of class period in that schedule that's not implemented and is being tabled?
Was
it 80 minutes?
No, there's a whole range of options because we never settled on a final model.
Oh.
So there's a whole bunch of different ones. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of different ones that we would have surveyed everybody on and gotten feedback. And
what's the current class time right now in the model we're in today? 70 minutes?
80.
60?
80.
Oh, it's 80.
Yeah.
80 without a lot of strategy, without a lot of professional.
Right, we just had to jump into it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Were you going to envision some type of professional learning this summer?
Right, that's why we've had to put off the new schedules that we were talking about for the future, because we need time to train everybody in it to make those successful, like what you've talked about. So it doesn't make sense to start that next year.
No, and there's going to be a 2-year window until you get the freshmen coming in that this is all they've ever known.
Correct.
Right, right.
Where the people that have lived through half and half are
Yeah.
going to be against it. So,
Yeah.
because it's completely different now. So
Right.
there is a window where you're going to hear that input.
Right.
Where a freshman comes in, okay, this is what I've had for
Although
all I know.
I can't help but to believe that living through this will make whatever that next thing is easier. You know, so teachers will have learned a lot from this year.
If you implement, though, you
Yeah.
have to provide professional development for the
Agreed.
staff. This,
Right.
you threw them into the fire.
Well, right, because
The
that's
80 minutes without,
what the years offered us, yeah.
that's
Brutal.
I feel bad. That's bad.
I have an easy question. So we're all going to offer bus transportation twice at the end of the day? Once for early dismissal and then once for lack of a better time, regular dismissal?
Hard to hear you here,
I didn't
Nance.
hear you.
Oh,
Nan.
yeah, the,
Bus transportation after class, early dismissal, because we're having to adjust the time because we have to get buses that we're also using for our elementary schools and our middle schools. So we're going to have 2 bus runs then in the afternoon?
one bus run at 1:30.
At 1:30. So if a student elects to stay later, or they need to stay later, they're on their own for getting home?
I think we're talking activity buses, Janice? Yes. So for those small number of students doing a smaller bus run, but not the full comprehensive run.
Do you run a later bus for the sport athletes, like a 6 o'clock bus route?
That's that activity, an activity route. When's the activity route run, Janice?
Well, we would run it at 3:30. Normally, we run it now at 4:30, but we would run it right at the end of the school day.
So we'd run a 3:31.
So, and again, in theory, then you could even have a longer commute than regular, than the 40 minutes,
Correct, yeah.
depending on
yeah.
what the route is. Okay.
But that
Thank you.
group would stick around and there'd be a lunch period for them.
A lunch period for them,
Because it'd
okay.
be just fewer students that we could spread out.
I actually have another question in
Yeah.
the same boat as that. So I'm assuming that the schedule was organized in this different way, with it going period 4, then 2, then 8, then 6, and the other way around, so that people that are taking lunch breaks during those times are maybe able to show up later to school or leave earlier. Are there bus routes for people in
No.
that boat? And are
So
they
they'd be
able to
allowed to
stay?
stay, but we wouldn't have a different run for those. So it's just the normal runs in the morning and then at the 1:30 time, and then just the smaller activity bus run at the end of the day.
Okay, so then they would be staying like in a cafeteria then?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and that's part of the challenge of the lunch periods, right? Is, you know, during those times, students need to be somewhere. All right, so here's the summary of what we've just been talking about. So each day would be a 4-period block with that early release in the day at that 1:20 end of the day on the buses by 1:30, so the buses can get back to the elementary schools by 2:30. Shorter block, as our students have mentioned, we've heard clearly from our students, is a common request of students that 80 minutes, and from our staff as well, 80 minutes is long. There's 10-minute passing periods. You know, it's gives teachers some time to wrap up and help the students that are there in person, but with remote learners, our teachers are setting up broadcast studios in every classroom, so they need to be able to, especially if they're moving classrooms, get there, get signed in, get their camera set up, get all of that ready to go, and including taking care of any personal needs between that first class and the next class, because they've been in a class for 70 minutes. And then, so I have that. And then also students will allow to use the restrooms during passing periods again, and with a 10-minute passing period, that allows us, you know, to stagger, you know, how we can queue people up to go into restrooms so that there can be physical distancing.
No lockers still, correct?
No lockers, no general lockers. However, students that are staying for the whole day, we would open up athletic lockers for them, you know, because they're not going home to get their stuff and then coming back. They would need somewhere to drop off their equipment for after-school practice.
So they carry their coats and their backpacks with them the whole day?
Yeah, the secret is that kids really don't wear coats.
They're a relic.
Oh, okay, well, I guess I lived in the
What,
dark.
guys, what?
What's that?
What, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry.
We can't hear what you're saying.
I said, lockers have gone by the wayside.
Right.
Everything's in the backpack, it's on them. Lockers are not what we all lived in. They have gone by the wayside. They're a relic, almost.
I'm glad we spent so
They're
much time
dinosaurs.
putting new ones in.
Everybody's virtual, huh?
I haven't used my locker at all in high school, even before COVID. And I think I am in the majority, I would say.
Yeah.
Zoe's nodding, she's agreeing with you.
What did, I didn't hear you, Sam. You said you
Yeah.
use your locker?
I was saying I haven't used my locker, like, period, before COVID either. So I think that that's not a huge issue.
Okay.
4 kids, none of them use their locker.
Yeah.
Yeah. Athletic lockers, though. they would use.
All right, in our current schedule is a feature of resource time in that middle of the day each day. We want to put that time back in and kind of redesign it on those last two, or on the Wednesday and Thursday days. We're going to be working with teachers over the next 2 weeks to design that appropriately. We want some accountability for that time built in so that students are assigned there, parents know that they're coming, and they know if they don't come, so that there's some accountability for the last chunk of the year here for using that time and students accessing that time. But we're going to work through those procedures over the next few weeks, heading back, for when we come back. With this, you're going to see the Monday schedule. One of the things that happens is we're extending the instructional time on Monday to those 40-minute class periods, which shortens the amount of time the teachers have for collaboration time and planning time and working together with their teams. So that time gets shifted then to the Tuesday afternoon and the Friday afternoon. So we're just pushing activities and time around in these schedules a little bit differently. We've talked about the snack, we've talked about lunch, schedule works with transportation, and just so we're all counting, it's 28 days, how appropriate during the time of a pandemic, 28 days of Tuesday through Friday days through the end of the school year.
That transportation issue too, just to highlight that, that was a major consideration here, and people asking, why don't you do what, we have to work with District 58 and 68 as well, and because we have a shared bus contract with them. And so that definitely impacts, has some bearing on what we can and can't do here.
Well, and the school days of actually 58 and 68 fit together pretty nicely here in the way that they typically would in a unit district, where your big kids go to school first and then they get home first.
Mm-hmm.
Your little kids then come to school after them and get home after them.
Mm-hmm.
This schedule is going to work just like that as if we were a unit district. Our students will get up, come to school, then the buses will go pick up the littles and drop them off. Then at 1:30, our kids will go and get dropped off, and then they'll drop off the littles. So it's not unlike what you would see in any unit district.
Okay. Monday.
This is the Monday schedule, so we still have some collaboration, professional learning time in the morning. We did hear from students that they have appreciated and continue to appreciate that late start on Monday. That gives us our time to do some of our work and then start the day. This is just a 40-minute straight period day. And then some of the features of this is that all 8 periods are meeting on that day. So this is the one time each week that a teacher has an opportunity to see all of their kids that day. All of our students have the opportunity to see all of their teachers that day. In our survey that we asked of students in November, 90% of our students said that they found those Mondays valuable for those reasons. We're increasing it to that 40-minute day. That gives us 15 more minutes of instructional time per class period because they're only 25 minutes now. So it makes it more like a regular class period. That time helps offset those shorter class periods as we fit everything in, as we've talked about on the rest of the week. Right now, we're recommending for the rest of this year that remains remote, however, and I'll explain kind of the back and forth we did versus remote in person on Monday in a second. One of the key essential things that happens on Monday is all the kids get everything that's expected to happen over the course of the week on that Monday, regardless if the next time they see is on Tuesday or Wednesday, Thursday or Friday. Like, that's the time where everybody gets the expectations for the week all at once, all in the same setting to move from. And when we look at the Monday schedule, there's only 6 Mondays remaining after spring break. So this was a huge discussion and debate amongst the administrative team as to how the Mondays should work out. I've listed for you here some of the pros and cons we worked through in each model.
Excellent.
One of the models that we were considering was just the alternating odd and even block, right? So you would just, the first day back, you'd be all odd period classes, and the next day would be even, and the next day odd, and the next day even from there until the end of the school year, regardless of what happened. Whatever you ended on Friday, if you ended with odds on Friday, and you were coming back on Monday, that was evens, right? And you just keep going back and forth throughout the whole school year. This is a model that would put students in school 5 days a week, where the other one in person 5 days a week. They're learning either way 5 days a week, right? The 8-period remote model is what we've been doing all year. We're just extending the amount of instructional time on that day in this. You can see kind of the pros and cons of each. In the remote, this way teachers are seeing every week, you're seeing your students, and students are in person 4 days a week. They see their teachers consistently 3 days a week in this model. And it's consistent. Kids know what's going to happen on Monday, and then how Tuesday works, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, every week. So you can see, I'm not going to read them all to you, but then one of the key ones that I want to point out is that last one, is that it offers a day when remote students are in the same setting as in-person students. So that's a key time each week where everybody's kind of in the same place at the same time for all of their classes. Sam?
Is there a reason besides just having longer class periods on Monday why the break went from 2 hours to nothing?
Yeah, the break in the middle of the day?
Is the only reason that's gone just for longer class periods?
Yeah, it was to get the longer class periods in, and now that you have a 40-minute, whenever your lunch period comes up, you have a 40-minute break for your lunch.
Okay, makes sense.
So, so it looks more like a traditional Monday when you were back in person before COVID. Yeah, Zoe?
This is a little nitty-gritty, but Sam and I are both students that actually don't take a lunch period, so then will teachers that, say, have like a staggered class, like me, for example, I take, during a normal school year, it would be half a period of choir and half a period of lunch. Would those teachers be encouraged to give us at least like a 10-minute food break?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and any teacher or any student that has 8 class periods, we'd encourage them to talk to their teachers and work out when you're going to get a break in there and how that's going to work. And that's not the majority of our students, but it absolutely is some of our students. All right, and then when we consider that alternating odds and evens, students would be in person 5 days a week, which is a huge thing, right? But the trade-off is some weeks you would have your class, you'd see your teachers 3 times, you'd see your other half of your teachers 2, right? And then the next week it would flip around the other way. There's really no day where you get to that check-in with all of your teachers. And remote students there's never a day where they're in the same setting with everybody else. And this is especially concerning with the 3 feet of physical distance, as I said earlier, where we could end up, because of quarantine periods, with lots of students ending up in a period of 10 to 14 days where they need to be remote, and we don't want to put our remote students at a disadvantage, but we also don't want our in-person students that need to go remote at a disadvantage either. And we feel like if there's never this check-in day, it puts them at a significant disadvantage. So when we factored all of those things out, we ended up with this remote Monday 8-period day, restructured to be different than it was before.
So can I just put you guys on the spot? So Sam and Zoe, I know you don't speak for all students, and Rick, you don't speak for all teachers, but in your experience, seeing all of your teachers on one day and having a weekly check-in with all students on one particular day, is that what do you think?
Do you see that as valuable?
That alternating block schedule for a teacher's planning is a disaster. You'd have your classes all over the place, but checking in, see, my schedule, Monday and Friday, I see all my classes, 50 minutes. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I do the 80-minute block. But I only see them twice in those 3 days. So I only see my classes 4 times a week. And so you can juggle it with the 50. You use the 50 minutes is kind of like the sounding board for the week or the finishing board for the week. And then in the middle is when you do your activities for me. But there is one day, and I saw that in here, where you don't get a plan. You go 8 to 3 nonstop, because the way it works, you will have one day where you don't get a planning period. And I saw that in here as one of the challenges.
If you're a teacher that teaches all on the evens or all on the odds, that we have a group of teachers that we need to troubleshoot for them.
It is better to see all your students, especially on a Monday. It's work because you can kind of plan for the week then.
Set it up.
You can move them forward there for the week, at least if you plan by the week. So I prefer the remote on Monday, and then I would prefer full Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But that's just,
Thank you. Well,
that's my opinion. For this year. Eventually, I think Hank's going to go full.
Yeah, we'll figure out, in the future, we'll end up with
Right?
something
Figure it
else.
out.
Yeah.
Then yeah, and if you'd like a student perspective, I can say that I'd speak for both the advantages and disadvantages of that. I think that it is valuable, like Rick was saying, to see all of your teachers each day, to see what the expectations of the week are and what you guys will be doing. But then to that also, like the current schedule we have right now, I think that some teachers maybe don't know how to utilize the awkward amount of time that the 25-minute periods would bring, which is solved in part by those longer class periods those days. So I'd say good thing you get to check in with everybody. Odd thing is that 40 minutes to 80 minutes, it's a really big difference. I'd say more so for teachers, and for me personally, I don't always feel like I get the most out of my Mondays right now with 25 minutes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree, basically. I think that 40 minutes is probably better than 25, but the disadvantage with that is, I would say just in general, Zoom fatigue is going to set in after about 5 or 6 periods, I think, for 90% of kids. But I think that there's merit in 40 minutes over 25 minutes. I think that that's definitely a good trade-off. While students are probably going to get more tired and more fatigued and more fed up with the 40-minute periods on Mondays, I think from an educational perspective, the goods outweigh the harms, I would say.
Personally, I would feel a little bit fatigued, 40-minute classes apiece, 5 minutes in between, but I'd also at least feel like I'm getting more out of my class each day than as opposed to what I'm doing now, where I don't feel fulfilled in certain classes. So it's the trade-off you make.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, so we still have a lot of work to do over the next few weeks to prepare for coming back, should this schedule be approved. We still have the time to allow all students to select which option they'd like to return in. As I mentioned, it's not a permanent choice. If they start remote and would like to come back in person, they could. We still need to plan that Wednesday and Thursday afternoon support time. We talked about lockers. Parking is a huge challenge. We allowed, because we could. We had all of the space. We allowed everybody who wanted to come and drive and park to do that. But now we have a lot more people used to driving and parking than what we can accommodate. So the Village of Downers Grove has been great. They've been troubleshooting some options with us, and we continue to work with them to try to come up with as many parking options as we can near the schools. So there'll be information following on that, and we'll reach out to students that we've issued parking passes to let them know kind of how this is going to shake out. And so that's very much in flux, but we are working, and of course the Village of Downers Grove, as always, has been great partners in trying to come up with solutions here. Contact tracing, we fully anticipate that this will become a tougher job with moving from 6 feet to 3 feet, because you're naturally going to end up in more situations where you are less than 6 feet around people for 15 or more minutes. We've got to work out the logistics, like what we're talking about, trash can cleanup, those, scheduling of the snack break. We still have some concerns with large group settings. We talked about tents and those kinds of things, or outdoor spaces. We're going to need some of those spaces for our large groups to enter into, because the whole band coming back, might not fit with 3 feet. And also, like a band, after a certain amount of time, we need the air to exchange in that space. So our outdoor spaces are already limited to some extent because of construction, but now we're taking over spaces in all of these other different ways that are going on. Teacher schedules, we still have quite a few things to work through. We have several teachers with 4 in a day, so one day is really heavy and the other day is very light. Our contract with the teachers stipulates that they can only teach 4 in a row if they agree to. So we might have some different things that we need to work through with breaks and those kinds of things to make it work. We're talking to each one of those teachers, or reaching out to each of those teachers and having them respond to us as to, how they would best like for us to interact with that, and then we'll figure it out and see how it works. But just so we know what their preferences are to start with. Because if there are some teachers that are just like, it's fine, I'll have a heavy day and a light day and I'm good. And then there's others, maybe if you're diabetic, you're not going to have a hard time teaching 4 in a row without having an opportunity to step out and eat something, or if you're a nursing mother, or there's all kinds of different situations where 4 in a row is really not going to be feasible for one of our teachers. We also have traveling teachers. We don't want to end up in any situations where, because now we're flipping these periods around to move the lunch periods to the end of the day, we don't want any scenario where a teacher has to go to one school, go to the other one and turn around and go back. That's just not productive use of anybody's time. And then part-time teachers, especially with that support time, we're putting that support time in the afternoon, but if you've chosen to be a part-time teacher so that you could have your afternoon free, it's hard for us to then put time when you need to work with students in the afternoon. So, there's some things that we need to work through employee-wise with all of those things. So our teachers have been great and flexible with us all year. We'll continue to work with them on all of these. And then the supervision of students that are going to stick around in the afternoon, we've got to figure out how many students that is, and then coordinate supervision for those students. All right, so this is the overview. This is the recommendation to the board that we're asking for approval for under action tonight. So it is the idea of we're returning. Everybody can come back after spring break. Monday is remote. Tuesday through Friday is the 1:30 release, 4 blocks, with all of the aspects that we've talked about today, with snacks and buses and everything else that we've been through, all of the safety measures. And then T99, because it's its own program, different group of students, different setup, we would return to what their traditional schedule is coming back. So that's the recommendation I'm asking the board to take action on tonight. Are there any revisions or changes that the board would like for us to consider as we take action? Otherwise, this is what I'm asking for.
I hear none. Oh, go ahead, Zoe.
Wanted to bring up the point that a lot of students that I talked to did share some concerns about traveling over spring break. I know that we talked about that a little bit, and that as of now, it wouldn't be mandatory to quarantine or provide proof of a negative test, but I just wanted to mention and throw that out there that a lot of students would be concerned that their classmates, traveled somewhere with very loose restrictions or weren't in compliance with, regulations and good safety measures, and that a lot of students would be more comfortable if there was something in place to ensure that people coming back didn't bring anything with them and maybe had to provide a negative test or quarantine for a few days. That's all.
Yeah, Zoe, that's a great question. We discussed it. All year, we have tried to stick as closely to that guidelines as possible and not add or remove additional guidelines. And the guidelines as they're presented to us from the health department is exactly what I presented today. It's encourage people to follow the safety guidelines as if they were at home when they travel, and if they do that, they're free to return. And if they don't, then they need to follow those additional protocols. Yeah, Sam?
Just to be 100% clear, I'm sure this was implied before, but in the survey that was sent out whenever it was, March 8th, there was a paragraph in here that said, in the low to moderate level, we can return full in person, and that implies that we would have less than 50 per 100,000, which is nowhere near what we're at. Would this schedule be, is the action tonight putting it in place no matter what, or putting it in place if this is, if
a
these
great
are the
question.
Well
numbers?
done, Sam.
Yeah, this was the difference that happened between when the CDC guidelines came out and then the IDPH guidelines came out. So this kind of got trapped in the middle with when the survey went out right between those two sets of guidelines. So this proposal would be to follow the IDPH guidelines, and we would be back. Community metrics are not a concern of schools any longer. Those are the concerns of the health department.
Yeah, that was a great question, though.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Very good question.
And to that question, great question, what I brought up earlier, I think we've had a lot of changes in a year of change that nobody could ever have expected. So if we're going to go with this for the last 8 weeks of the school year, I would think any change to this for any reason, adaptive pause or any other reason, any change to this or any potential change to this for the rest of the year, I think we need to go through, I would want to go through the board. I don't know.
As long as it's under the administrative purview, I'm happy to bring any change back to the board for approval. The only thing that I can't guarantee that is if the health department calls us up and says, you're closed tomorrow. That's totally out of my control.
Right, but if anything that has any type of decision that needs to be made about changing the schedule, I would want to make sure that that goes through those.
I totally agree to that with one caveat. We are still waiting to hear from Illinois about SAT testing the week of April 16th. So that week, we may have to have some kind of an alternative schedule in place, depending on, that's still changing almost by the day. And that week, depending on what happens, we might have to adjust for SAT testing. But other than that, this is what we're proposing from now until the school year ends. Yeah, we'd like for everybody to just know that this is what's going to happen and count on it, and this is what we're doing for the rest of the year. At least, I know we're never going to have a schedule that makes 100% or even 50% of people happy right now, because it's so difficult depending on each, as we saw tonight, each individual family has different needs right now. And but if we could at least offer them, what to expect from now until the end of the year, I think that would give people some comfort.
Well, I think it's a job well done, Hank. This is so many moving parts, and to basically come up with yet a new schedule that will work and accomplishes as much as it does. I think this is well done. There's just a lot of moving parts and a lot of people that provide input into this. And I really want to thank everybody too that took the time to respond to the surveys and shared their opinion. It was a good amount of feedback. I wish there had been even more, because once again, the majority didn't respond. But I appreciate the people that did. This is it's a Herculean effort, and there's no way to make everybody happy. But I think this gets, more in-person time. We're so fortunate. You kind of glossed over the idea, and we've talked about it a few times, more participation here than in our neighboring districts. But that's huge. I think it speaks to the transparency of the process that we've had and the understanding that the community has in what we've been doing. That there is more people in our community, there are more people in our community that feel safe about being in the school environment than most other districts around us. And I think that that's going to bode well for this going forward. Because I would love to see those numbers. I'd love to see us up 90%
I'd love to see everybody
plus.
who can be back.
The more we can get in the in-person, the better. And this is, I think, is going to get it done. So thank you.
So I wanted to also say kudos to Hank and the administration staff who's worked on this. I know that I can personally say I cannot put the kind of time into this, and I'm going to err on the side that most of our community can't either, because they're committed to something else on a daily basis, I'm certain. Yeah. So the time that you guys put into coming up with something that makes sense for as many people as possible, and then being able to speak to the questions, the different things you have to think of in order to put something like this together. So looking at every aspect, I know it's not an easy task. I am grateful that you're willing to do the work. I spoke to other people in districts in the city and kind of talked about some of the things we've done, and they've even said, wow, at least your district is trying to get it right for most. So I say thank you for that.
Well said.
You're here. Here. Yeah.
All right. I don't think these are things that any of us ever wanted to do or talk about or have to work through, but I think everybody's trying to do the best they can for kids. No matter whether somebody likes this option or hates this option, I only assume that they are caring about what they should, what's best for their kids. And we're trying to, our challenge is we've got to put together a program for 5,000 kids. And sometimes it feels, I know as a parent, like I'm not hearing or we as a team aren't meeting their needs, and I understand that. But we're trying to build the best program comprehensively for the entire district. And I recognize that it's not going to check the box for everybody. But know that we've considered it, we've worked through every angle to try to find one that works within the guidelines, keeps people safe, and gets kids back. I mean, that has been my goal since August. The board is aware of that I didn't get into this job for kids not to be at school. And so anything that we can do to get them back is what I want to see have happen.
And I think I would say that's probably most of the board's goal has been to get the kids back in school. Yeah. So I don't want anyone to ever think that that hasn't been the case.
No, the board hasn't stood in the way, the teachers haven't stood in the way, the students haven't, the families haven't. It's just been a pandemic that has stood in the way.
Yeah, that thing. Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. All right, the next item is our annual staffing and curriculum overview. And I believe that
come on down.
Rob is going to kick this off.
Hey everybody. So on top of figuring out school year this year, we're at the point where we're starting to figure out school next year. So just a quick reminder, the way that we section is that students go through this process with their counselors requesting classes for next year. And then we take all of that information and we start to section. And then when we figure out our number of sections, then we go into our staffing and we figure out our staffing. So the package that we have for you tonight is all of that together, the sectioning and then the implications for staffing that we have. One thing I'd like to say before we start this presentation is since we posted the documents on Friday, we had 2 changes. So you'll notice in your packets that there's some documents that have changed. Those are related to 2 people. The first one is Mark Collins. Mark has decided to retire, so that makes a change on your documents in 7B. You'll notice that Mark's name is there now. The other one is we did a final quality control check today, and Delilah Lopez is a staff member who was covering for leave of absence, and so we don't have a spot for her next year. So you'll notice that there's a change on 5B, 7A, and 8C related to that move. So she comes off of the list for renewing for next year, and she moves on to the list for releasing for next year. So what I'm going to do is go through our first part here, which is part 1, talking about this chart that's in your packet here. That chart is the summary of our staffing recommendations for next year. And we have 2 really large sections. One is the top section there that we call the instructional FTE. That's built based on those classes that students recommend and the number of sections that we have. And you can see that our staffing for next year are recommended is 323.2 FTE based off the sections that broke out for student requests. Then the other part of our staffing is the non-instructional FTE. That's all the other staff that's there to support students that doesn't sway with course selections. So those are all listed down below. That gives us a request of 96.0 FTE, and that gives us total an increase of 1.8 request for next year. Now packaged in that 1.8 is what we talked about at the last meeting, a 1.0 for T99. And then a 0.6 spread between the 2 campuses for the special services social worker. So that gives you a 1.6, so really we're at a positive 0.2 if we add on top of those in terms of sectioning. So that's where we are with our sections. I'm going to hand it over to Ryan Doherty and Georgia Hash, who are our associate principals for curriculum and instruction, and they're going to talk through some highlights with the sectioning. They really are the brains behind all of that section. All that data comes in, and they're the ones who crunch it together. I'm just the person that they tell me who we need to have on the documents here. So I'll hand it off to them.
And Ryan, is this your first time in front of the board?
This is.
Ryan is new to our team
first
this
in
year.
person here. Thank you. George and I are gonna kind of share, we divided by department rather than dividing by school. So I'm gonna start off with CTE. Our enrollment is slightly up in accounting itself, and our new business classes, specifically incubator, have been well received by students. We'll be running 1 section of that new course at South and 2 sections at North. We've gone slightly down in some of our hands-on courses, and because students were choosing their, making their course selections in December and January, we feel like perhaps some of their selections may have been influenced by not being sure at what was going to happen for next school year. So we are down a little bit in facts. We're also down a little bit in our work cooperation, and specifically at North, a little bit down in our PLTW class.
Good evening. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the English area. For the first time ever, really, we are going to run a TV course at South, which is super exciting. North, as many of you know, has had TV for a long time, and they have some very specific equipment for that, but technology has changed greatly, and so there's a lot of things you can do in that arena where you don't necessarily need that traditional equipment. So it's a course that's been on the books forever for both schools. We just haven't been able to offer it over here. So we are going to offer that course. And we're in the process with construction too. You probably remember there's going to be part of the radio program is going to have a space in the cafeteria. So we're working really hard to hopefully bring that radio enrollment up and keep increasing that. We think kids will be really interested once they see that. We love to highlight for you things that you have supported for us recently, and just in the fall, you approved a new course called Black American Literature, and we will have 2 sections of that course at each building next year. So that is exciting for us. And then North also has an increased enrollment in the area of yearbook. and in the area of AP Literature, which is always good. And we have an increase in AP Literature, which wasn't surprising based on the numbers that were moving through the system. So we can kind of foresee that. I think I'm staying up here to talk about fine arts. So art stayed pretty steady from last year. And what our fine arts department chairs have heard in their meetings with other chairs in the area is that art managed to stay pretty steady. We were worried about a lot of the electives with the pandemic situation. Music has taken a little bit bigger hit, which probably is not surprising. And most of the department chairs in the area have said that it has been more, the pandemic situation has been more detrimental to choir than to any of the other areas. So we weren't really surprised to see that happen in our numbers a little bit as well. We know that some of our sender schools were forced to adjust their elective offerings based on the pandemic, so we're very hopeful, of course, that this will be a short blip in the system. But we're going to be working hard as we come out of the pandemic to get the choir numbers back up, and even some of the band. The band is in pretty good shape, and orchestra is pretty steady, but to get those back up. And one other exciting thing, that North will be able to offer AP Art History again next year. That's something that only happens, seems like every 2 or 3 years, and it hasn't happened in a while, so that's really exciting.
You'll hear kind of a running theme with the impacts of the pandemic, and that is, has hit our interventions this year. So students, as they've been out, some students that have done fairly well in school before, being on their own and having to organize themselves, that we've started to see an increased need of executive functioning, how much a student can advocate for themselves, organize their classes, study tips, organizing their notes. And so we have seen an increased need, and we'll be adding sections of freshman, sophomore, and advanced seminar to support some of our upperclassmen as we start to roll into next year and find ways to support them. In our feeder schools, we have a sense that students may have struggled a little bit more in math. We've seen a rise in our foundations math class for our incoming freshman class. And with not having in-person access to their math teachers every single day, that we sort of attribute it to that, although students in some of our feeders have also accessed paper, and our high school students are accessing paper, and so with that online assistance, we're going to hopefully see them catch up a little bit. Also, we are still offering the virtual option for Calculus 3 with Elmhurst College, and our AP and honors enrollment has remained fairly consistent throughout our math sections.
In the area of PE, driver's ed, and health, that one is, of course, required for the most part, so we don't see a lot of swings there, but you will remember that a couple years ago we started the sports officiating course, and this year we had a section of that over here, but next year we have 2 sections of that. So that is exciting. The personal training course is up and doing well. Our dance classes actually continue to rise in enrollment, which is really exciting that the juniors and seniors are picking that as one of their electives. And then North saw a bit of a rise in their stress management course, which may go, like Ryan said, along with everything else that we're kind of seeing that's just a sign of the times right now. In science, we have had several years now with Project Lead the Way courses. Last year, you guys approved human body systems, and that ran this year, and it's running next year as well with a higher enrollment. So we're really happy about that. The AP Environmental Science course, we've been teaching that for about 4 or 5 years now, just continues to grow. It's up another section at South next year. We'll have 4 sections of that AP course. And we We did see a slight dip in AP Physics, nothing alarming, but just a slight dip that we hadn't seen. It's been pretty consistent for a while.
One area that students seem to choose more this year is social studies. And if we think about the events in the world, we shouldn't be that surprised that students are taking more of an interest in social studies electives. Government is up specifically at South, and we've seen a significant increase in social studies elective at North, whether it be sociology or multicultural studies, and partly with the dip in CTE, with students not being sure about the hands-on nature of courses next year, it's possible that some of the students decided to choose a social studies elective instead because they may have felt that it would have been a more consistent experience from what they could anticipate, no matter which way the school year would look. In terms of world language, we are down one section in German at South and in French at North. However, the AP German is back up to 19 students, so that had a little bit of a rebound. And while we're consistent in Spanish at North, Spanish is down a bit at South. However, they will be running 2 sections of Heritage 2 for the first time. We are adding English language courses for both North and South. North will be running English 1 and bilingual support for the first time at North. And South will be offering bilingual physical science and bilingual resource as well. And you'll hear more about those courses from Gina Zaccardi.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'll start talking about bilingual then. So we are adding to our bilingual offerings. We are seeing an increase in enrollment at specifically at North High School in our Spanish-speaking students. So for the first time, we will be starting a part-time bilingual program at North High School, which means that we'll be adding a bilingual resource, and we'll also be adding EL English 1. So we will be able to retain our EL English 1 students. Students will still have the option, as they have for years, if they wish to travel to South High School for the full-time bilingual program. But we will have that offering at North, so we're really excited about that. We've also increasing, or will be increasing, I should say, as I believe Georgia and Ryan alluded to, our offerings at South High School. We'll be offering for the first time a bilingual physical science course. For the majority of those students came out of our bilingual biology course this year, and we will also be starting our bilingual resource. So we will have more offerings for our bilingual Spanish-speaking students as well as our EL students.
So, Gina, have we ever considered, for as long as I can remember, we've had Spanish, French, and German. Have you ever considered expanding the languages offered in Arabic or Chinese or going to other language offerings?
Yes, we have. In fact, a number of years ago, I can't remember exactly when, I want to say approximately 8 to 9 years ago, we did survey students and to see what interests were, and we came back to the 3 languages. We have had requests over the years, and it seems like I had more requests about 7 or 8 years ago, and I haven't had any requests in the recent 5 or 6 years, but there is some new legislation that is coming forward where students will be required to have 2 years of a foreign language. We have several years for that, but we will definitely need to consider what courses we would like to offer and what courses our students are interested in taking, since all students will be required to take a world language course.
Yeah, and I'm sure that has a lot to do with partnering with our feeder districts because they have, you know, the same offerings in language that we do.
Right, exactly.
Except German. They don't have, the feeders aren't offering the German.
Right.
They're
Right.
offering the French and the Spanish.
And only District 58 offers French, although we do still have students that come from Avery Coonley in their French program as well, but a small number, obviously.
It would just seem to be a larger offering and more options is kind of, would seem to be we're at that point where we should be thinking about expanding those offerings.
Absolutely, and we may attract more students by more offerings.
So today it's 1 year of language that's required, and you said now it'll go to 2. Did I hear that right?
I believe you're asking if we have a graduation requirement for world language?
Yes.
We do not.
No.
We do not.
Oh, okay.
Many of our students do take world language, but we do not have a graduation requirement. Students are required to take a number of electives for which world language is one of those offerings. So it
Okay.
could be CTE, world language, fine arts,
I always thought that.
even social studies electives beyond the 3 years.
But many colleges are
Right,
required.
it's
to
really
That's-
kind of a college.
Some colleges do require
That's
it.
what it is. I know there is a requirement somewhere.
Exactly.
Okay.
So any other questions about EL? Okay. So the curricular offerings, Georgia and Ryan spoke about a lot of those. You'll notice that we have a slight decrease in the number of courses that we're recommending for cancellation and an increase in the number of courses that we would like the board to approve and certainly offer with an enrollment of under 20. It just so happens a couple of those are language courses. Also, several of them are upper level capstone courses, like in the languages as well as in some AP offerings like AP Physics, and our PLTW courses, all 4 of the engineering strand courses at North High School. We are very excited to offer a lot of those courses that are very specialty courses with under 20 to our students. Many of them are programmatic in nature and allows students to go on to the next level or, as I said, as a capstone course. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's fun to see them up here from behind.
Good evening. My name is Scott Wegazer, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the special services. I know we had a board meeting that we went over a little bit of that, and Rob had a nice introduction for it. So instructionally, we have the 1.0 request for T99. As you know, we're growing in size. So that would increase us to 6 teachers at the transition program. And then at North, we have a 0.4 FTE increase that's covering our instructional program and some co-teaching. And then obviously we talked about the non-instructional social work. There's a 0.2 at South and then a 0.4 social work at North. All right, thank you.
Good evening, good to see you all again. Jeff Burkholz, returning for another meeting. And I'm going to kind of just go through some of the highlights from the last couple of sections in the packet that you have, particularly section 4. One of the first things you see there are a list of teachers who are being honorably dismissed. These are non-tenured staff who we don't have the same amount of FTE for them based on all the pieces that have moved around that you heard about thus far. We do have the option to bring those teachers back at a lower FTE if they are willing to do so. So we have that option for them. There are 6 of those staff members that are in there, as well as you'll see the resolution, again, with the exhibits that shows the names of those people who are being honorably dismissed. The next section we start getting into 4B is we also have some staff that we are non-renewing. This goes back to what Rob alluded to earlier. We have some staff who are covering leaves of absences. And so we have staff returning. We don't have FTE for those staff, so they're the ones that we then non-renew. So they won't be coming back unless something were to suddenly open up, perhaps, and we ask them to come back. Then we also have Section 5, I guess we're moving on to there. Section 5 is the non-tenured teachers that we are bringing back. And so that's the really long list, and it breaks it down year by year where everyone's at, so you kind of get that full view. You also see that as well on the traditional board report, same list of names. The numbers are a little bit different because one is for the current year where they're at, and then the other one's projecting out to next year. So if you see that that doesn't align when you're looking at some of those, that would be why. So, and then the next piece that we sometimes do this time of year, but is going to wait till April for this time, is getting the list of all of our staff members who will be tenured, and we'll recognize those at the April workshop meeting. So that is yet to come.
Thank you.
That concludes the show for this evening. Real quick, just one change that we're making this year to the process is usually this time of the year is when we bring forth the people who the state of Illinois will be granting tenure to next year. We've decided to separate those out, so based on your actions tonight, some people will be on that list, and then we'll have them for you at the workshop meeting in April to recognize those who are going to be receiving tenure. This year it gets a bit more complicated because it's not only traditional tenure, it's accelerated tenure, it's portable tenure, so that changes some of the years that they've been with us in which they get to receive that. So that's our section. I believe next on the agenda is our public hearing, and that's based off of the number of people that we have on the honorable dismissal list, so we have to move into that. Thanks.
Do we have several teachers that are going to be fast-tracked for tenure?
I'd have to look back at our list. We have a few who have portable tenure. So portable tenure is when they achieved tenure in another district and they were here. There's a few who are accelerated. That requires 3 years.
Right.
But yeah, there's a few that
There
are
are
on
a
there.
few. Will
Yep.
they be delegated then, or are they just going to be in the group?
We can break those out for you if you'd like to see that.
please.
Yeah, in the April workshop, just to say which pathway did they use to get to tenure. Sure. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All
So
right.
many moving parts.
Yeah. All right, Mark's going to cover this one here.
Just to have a quick resolution that we passed last year. It's the same format. If you recall, we have a 9-year agreement with Rexnord Corporation, which is in Downers Grove. They're an aeronautic engineering firm. And as an incentive to move their headquarters here rather than closing down this, one of their plants here and keep them in Downers Grove, we worked with District 58 and the village to set up a rebate agreement that when they build a new headquarters here, about 200,000 square foot facility, and agreed to staff it at a certain level of more than 200 employees, that we would abate some of or pay them back some of their increase in property taxes compared to the new facility compared to the prior facility. And that was about $56,000 was the difference, the incremental difference that we got in taxes because they came in on as new construction. So we got something right out of the gate, but we agreed to take off 90% of that and refund that back to them, and then do 10% more or less actually refund each year. So we did 90% last year, we're going to do 80% this year. And the reason we're asking you to pass the resolution now is because we won't get their assessed valuation to do the exact calculation until the end of this month, and they will want that by the end of the first week in April. So we need to make a decision ahead of time. So the resolution gives me authority to make that adjustment to their taxes and to send that to the county clerk, and it'll abate their taxes. Any questions?
I just had one about the 272 employees. Do we have any sense of how many of those jobs are actually in district?
They don't give us the addresses, but it was just to have that many, agreement was to staff it at that level.
I know that,
Yeah.
yeah. I was just curious if we had any, if
No,
it
and
was
it is down from last year, so it looks like they've suffered a little bit too, even though it's, aerospace industry's hurting a bit. They make replacement parts for planes, and
Yeah.
when a plane is built, you have to guarantee that you'll make that part for the next 10 years, and that's what they do. So they have a very steady business normally, but could be that there's less things going on with planes, apparently, because of the pandemic. But we don't have addresses of where the individuals live or where, if they're in our
But
community.
they couldn't report out that, 75%
They give
of
us a
those are
listing.
Not part of our agreement with them.
Yeah, they give us a listing of the positions and the amount paid to them, so we know that the average job is, $78,000 or whatever it is for the whole group. But it exceeds the minimum, which we had agreed to. And we kind of got upset by the pandemic this year with doing more creative things, but I think the long-term plan is for us to have some of our students go there and learn some trades there and become, a partner with them that way too. They're very open to that.
I support this. I was at the groundbreaking. I think this is great for the community. I just, it'd be nice to know if a lot of those jobs were actually people living here in the district as well. So that's all.
All right, that's up for action and approval later tonight. I'll bring up Jim here to talk about the T99 build-out and the bid approvals for construction related to it.
Good evening, everyone. I'm ready for my snack break. Anybody? Okay, this is for T99. Good news. Told you a couple weeks ago that we had some good bids. Here they are. This is for the remaining 2,500 square feet of the build-out. That work will be done this summer. 10 packages, 47 bidders, 3 bidders at least in each trade. So really competitive and really good numbers. So our projected budget for this project was about $985,000. So these are the construction costs. You add in contingencies, architect and engineering fees, construction management, and some contingency. We're still going to be well under 785. We're going to save at least 200 or more. So we're really in good shape. All these vendors we've worked with, except for one, but they scoped out and understand the work. That was the number 10. That's it, acoustical type ceiling. So it was the only bidder that we haven't worked with. So everyone scoped out, they're all good to go. So tonight we'll ask that you approve all 10 for $526,355. Questions?
General trades, what does that mean, Jim? Over here. General trades.
Cabinetry, carpentry, all those work that's within that.
Were there any stipulations in the bid? Are they allowed to stipulate that?
Sorry.
Are they allowed to stipulate in any way that their cost is dependent on current lumber prices, that sort of thing? Or is this, they're committed to this number?
They're committed to this number.
Okay.
I have the contracts ready to sign tomorrow morning, if you guys approve tonight. But quite honestly, I was expecting,
Yep.
earlier, a few months ago, I was telling you it was going to be under the 985.
Yep.
I didn't think we'd be this good, so I'm very happy with what we
No, this is good.
are coming in with. And we'll be able to put some of those funds back, because we're using interest from MFP back to contingencies for the MFP.
Yeah, this is good. Thank you.
I just had a question about timing. Do we know when the build-out will start and complete?
That was my question.
Sure. We're actually going to start aggressive early. We're going to do some work back there while they're still in session. So we're going to get back there and start working end of April, beginning of May. And then by the end of summer, we're done. By August 10th, we're finished.
And because it's in the back, we're not going to interfere with any of the
None at all.
returning. Thank you, James.
Terrific. Thank you. Yeah, well done.
Okay, the next item is master facility plan progress. As you can see, last couple of months, we've been tightening down the scope a little bit and keeping, this one is very small increase this month, but it's a slight increase because of reduction in scope. Right now, we're spending the next couple of weeks up until spring break related to the master facility plan of outlining priorities for the last items that are on the list within the buildings, and then we'll create a long-term plan for everything that we want to do that didn't get covered in the master facility plan, so that we have an idea of long range what our continued scope of work is. Contingency remains strong heading into the summer here, and you can still see there's quite a bit, especially in Phase C allowances, that could roll back into the contingency should we not use it. So once again, as we have been, we're on budget, we're on schedule, and all of these projects are scheduled to be completed for the return next fall. Any questions?
Great to see things going as planned. It's one of those things I think people haven't been paying as close attention to as they might have otherwise because of COVID. I mean,
Yeah.
community in general.
I can't wait to get everybody back to see it all.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I was about to say, I can't wait for everyone to see it.
All right. FOIA requests. We had them, and we continue to respond to them, and we continue to get them.
Thank you.
They're on our website.
Moving on to the next section of the agenda is the public hearing. The next agenda item is a public hearing on the proposed reduction in force of teachers. This hearing is held in line with Section 24-12 of the Illinois School Code, which provides for the hearing when when the number of teachers to be reduced due to economic necessity is greater than 5 or 150% of the average number of teachers honorably dismissed in the preceding 3 years, whichever is more. While the reductions contemplated later in this evening's agenda are not based on economic necessity, we are holding the hearing with the intent of giving both the teaching staff and the public notice of layoffs and the opportunity to express their views. To be clear, the reductions in force contemplated later in this evening's agenda will not impact educational programming and are not based on economic necessity. Rather, these reductions are based on course selections for the upcoming school year. Do we have anybody who would like to speak?
I'm sorry, is this the open time to speak?
No, this is regarding the
Public
reduction
hearing.
in force of teachers.
Hearing none, I will ask for a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Terry?
Second.
Joanna?
Thank you. Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Sherelle Fuller.
Aye.
Dan Nicholas.
Aye.
Rick Pavanato.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye. The hearing is closed. We're going to move on to the consent agenda. I have one question related to the consent agenda. I apologize for not getting in earlier. Does any other board member have anything they want to remove before we ask the question, before we call the agenda?
No.
No. I just have one question, if I may, about Costa Rica.
Mm-hmm.
It's conceivable that we will have people who have already graduated going?
Mm-hmm. We've done this, Gina can probably speak to it better for me, but I think we've done this with a couple of other tours where we've allowed students that graduated but had already paid into a trip to then come back and participate in it, just because of COVID.
Sure.
What are we talking?
But they would have to observe
Rica.
all the
Oh,
same
Yes.
rules and regulations as any student going.
Correct.
Okay.
They'd have to follow all the rules. Yep.
Thank you. Sherelle, did you have something? I'm sorry.
I just said I thought you were talking about Costa Rica, but I wasn't sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll move closer. Okay, next we need a
I
motion.
guess I didn't need you, Gina. I had it.
Thank you, though. We need a motion for the Board of Education to approve the consent agenda, which includes A, Personnel Report, 2021-2022 full-time renewals, 2021-2022 non-tenure part-time renewals, appointments certified, transfer position classified, appointments classified. B, Personnel Report, retirements classified, resignations classified. C, Financial pages. D, 2021-2022 proposed amended calendar. E, to waive the spectator admission fees charged by District 99 for events held on the 99 campus for the 2021 school year. And F, rescheduling previously scheduled tour Costa Rica 2020.
So moved.
I'm sorry, Terry?
Second.
Joanna?
Thank you very much. Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Sherelle Fuller.
Aye.
Dan Nicholas.
Aye.
Rick Pavanato.
Aye.
Nancy Kupka.
Aye, the consent agenda passes. Now we're going to move on to the recommendations for action. First, we need a motion for the Board of Education to approve the 2020-2021 school year plan revision as discussed to begin April 6, 2021, and continue to operate under the COVID-19 reopening plan approval resolution approved on August 3, 2020.
So moved.
Joanna?
Yeah.
And
Second.
Sherelle?
Thank you. Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
Sherelle Fuller.
Aye.
Dan Nicholas.
Aye.
Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Rick Pavanato.
Nay.
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Nancy Kupka.
Aye, the motion carries. Then we need a motion for the Board of Education to adopt the resolution authorizing notice of honorable dismissal of non-tenured teachers other than final year probationary teachers, and that the President and Secretary be authorized to sign same.
So moved.
Terry?
Second.
I'm sorry,
Dan?
Second.
Dan, second.
Thank you. Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Dan Nicholas.
Aye.
Rick Pavanato.
Aye.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Sherelle Fuller.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye, the motion carries. Next, we need a motion for the Board of Education to adopt the resolution authorizing notice of non-renewal to non-tenured teachers other than final year probationary teachers, and that the president and secretary be authorized to sign same.
So move.
Yeah.
Joanna and
I'll second.
Terry.
Thank you. Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Rick Pavanato.
Aye.
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Sherelle Fuller.
Aye.
Dan Nicholas.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye, the motion carries. Next, we need a motion for the Board of Education to approve the resolution authorizing property tax abatement for the Rex Nord facility for the 2020 tax year.
So moved.
Second.
Mike and Sherelle.
Thank you. Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Sherelle Fuller.
Aye.
Dan Nicholas.
Aye.
Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Rick Pavanato.
Aye.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye, motion carries. And finally, we need a motion for the Board of Education to approve bids in the aggregate amount of $526,355 for the T99 build-out.
So moved.
Second.
Mike and Joanna.
Mike and Joanna.
Mhm.
Thank you. Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Joanna Vasquez Drexler.
Aye.
Sherelle Fuller.
Aye.
Dan Nicholas.
Aye.
Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Rick Pavanato.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye, the motion carries. Next order of business is the Policy Committee.
The Policy Committee recently met, and we discussed the policies that are listed there. Details are available in the board packet. Just a reminder to the board and to the public that this is the 1-month review period for everyone to review those, ask questions, and then we would go to the Policy Committee with any revisions. The board would be then asked to approve this with any changes at the next board meeting. The majority of the changes in here are recommended by press from the Illinois Association of School Boards, and administrative review of those with some slight changes, except for policies 3.56 and 7.345. Those are changes based on the district's legal counsel in regards to changes that are coming in laws and changes to tech in the next, actually in July. Other than that, the majority of the changes are small in nature, but you can read through and see what they actually are. I had one more thing. Oh, and we also reviewed the policies at the last meeting that were unique to District 99 in our 2-year review of those policies, and found no changes that we needed to bring forward to the board. So that's where we're at. Anything else that I left out there, Rick or Sherelle?
No, I think that was perfect.
Hey, what do you know?
No.
Thank you.
All right. So if you have changes, please email Rick, Sherelle, and I, and or concerns, and we're happy to address those in advance of the next board meeting.
So, okay, so in advance of the next board meeting. Okay, anything else? All right, now we are going to move to the second reception of visitors. This is the second reception of visitors, which is intended for audience members to address the board on any topic pertaining to Community High School District 99. Comments are limited to 3 minutes to provide all visitors an equal opportunity to address the board. If individuals needing more time should submit their thoughts in writing to the board secretary, Mrs. Nidek. Visitors addressing the board need to come to the microphone, state your full name. The proceedings are being tape recorded for the purpose of producing accurate meeting minutes, and they are live streaming. And I reserve the right to modify these protocols if circumstances warrant, and we appreciate you observing these protocols. Did you want to?
So there was a lot that was stated here today, so if you'll excuse me, I'm just going to have to reference my notes. You all said that you wanted kids back in school, but they are not back in school full-time. You just voted that they are not going to be back in school full-time. Again, I will restate this. Why is it that private schools, charter schools, and Catholic schools can be back in school full-time and have been since the fall, and District 99 cannot? I don't understand that, and I haven't heard an answer. Fatigue makes us all tired. I'm sure each and every one of you are tired. You're exhausted. We're all exhausted. This pandemic has wreaked havoc
on everyone. I empathize with your fatigue. We all feel it. Many have tragically lost loved ones. I can't imagine their pain. There's a lot of information and stats that have been read here tonight. However, I'd like to read a couple for the record. According to a national study of insurance claims, since March 2020, our kids from ages 13 to 18, here are some of the effects. Overdoses are up 95%. Substance abuse is up 64%. Depression is up 84%. Our children are anxious. You stated that. I agree with you. The world is anxious. The world has been anxious before this pandemic. Life is full of challenges and risks. There is a huge element that has been missing here in all of these discussions and these charts tonight. As leaders, as parents, as educators, we have an obligation to teach our children, to lead our children. We have to teach them to be resilient. We have to teach them to take calculated risks. We need to teach them to be courageous. We need to teach them to not live in fear. They're being taught over and over again to be afraid, to be very afraid. The scientific data says that if they catch COVID, they will recover. They will not die. I wish I could find the stats, but unfortunately, this building cut off my phone and I can't. But the stats say they will recover. They will be healthy.
Your 3 minutes has expired.
Could I have someone do a motion to give me 2 more minutes to 3 minutes, please, to complete this? I am the only teacher, I am the only parent here tonight.
That's at your discretion, Nancy.
Would anybody like to make a motion?
I'm asking for an additional time.
I move to let you go ahead and have 2 more minutes.
Okay, you got it.
I wish more parents were here tonight. They're tired. We're all tired. But if you look at that slide, and I wish I could reference it, but there was a slide that said that the teachers are speaking to you. They unanimously said they wanted their children back full-time. In your email, you said that most of the teachers have been vaccinated, and that's great. And I wish they were here, and I hope I can communicate to more of them. But seriously, what I don't understand is in the stat, again, correct me if I'm wrong, said that most teachers don't want to be back full-time. And I don't understand that. The teachers that I talk to say they miss the children and they want to be back in class. But yet the data that you shared with us tonight doesn't say that. And that doesn't ring with me. I don't understand that. There's always going to be challenges in life. We need to show these children that we can overcome them, that we can move forward. Instead, we're arguing about snacks and lunches. That can be solved. Small business owners and restaurateurs solved it. It's called tents and heaters and air conditioning and spaced seating. We need to show them that we can live again and we can move forward. And we're not doing that. We're instilling them with more fear. I'm sorry. I hate to say it like this, but your words ring hollow to me. When you say you want these children back full-time and you're looking out for them, but yet their parents are telling you they want them back in school full-time, and you do not listen. I don't understand that.
Anybody else like to address the board?
We did receive online 8 comments from 4 different people. Most of them are concerned, well, most of them from one person are concerned in how I represented the survey results. And then there's a couple other just general questions. So that's what was received.
Okay, and we'll respond to the general questions.
Yeah, people who reach out to us with general questions, we respond, not to ones that come in this way. So if somebody has a general question, they should email the administration.
Okay, thank you.
These become part of, this is messages to the board and become part of the board record.
And the board does receive those. Each member receives those, and we have the opportunity to review them.
The board always receives these the next day, and then they become part of the minutes.
Yeah, we did receive them this morning. We did receive them
Yeah, throughout the day.
throughout the day today.
Yep, yep.
Okay. We're going to move on to communications and announcements. Report on LEND. Dan?
I don't have an update.
We have a meeting next Friday? I don't know. At some point, we have an upcoming meeting. There's a lot going on in Springfield. Board members, I sent you some of that. I'll send you another update probably tomorrow when I update all of the staff with the legislative ongoings in Springfield. So a lot of things going on right now.
Thank you. Joanna, CSID?
Actually, we don't have a lot of items that relate to District 99. However, I thought I might read this one portion because in light of all our discussion tonight, these are some real problems that our cooperative school is contending with. The past week, we've been spending significant time reviewing any opportunities and ways to increase in-person instruction for the remainder of the year. None of the items below are excuses for why something is or not taking place for programming. I am only trying to convey the substantial complexity of the issues and the aggravating and mitigating variables that are part of problem solving and planning to provide context to the attachment regarding program and service status. Parents have been surveyed, again, as to their preference for their child to be remote or in person. There are still a significant number of families who are choosing the remote option. This makes it very difficult to staff increased in-person times and provide synchronous instruction remotely. We are looking at student cohort changes, reassignment of staff, asking part-time staff to increase to full-time, looking for long-term subs and subs to fill needs. We have purchased additional technology, iPad and tripods to stream instruction. They are still short-staffed for teaching assistants, advertising in local papers, Career Builder, and typical sites. We've also sent information to parents this week to let them know that there are employment opportunities at SASED, so parents might even come to work for them. It is a circular problem in that while individuals are home with their children, they are not applying, and without applicants, SASED is short-staffed. Masks and social distance, we have students who are not able to maintain wearing a mask, and many of those children require adult support within 6 feet of social distance. The staff in multi-needs program have had 2 children pass away in the past year and lost a beloved staff member in December. They're understandably heightened in their concern for the health and safety of students and staff, as many students are medically fragile. We also have behavioral concerns. As students are returning from a year away from school, the social and emotional needs of students are significant for some students. Some students are showing significant behavioral challenges, and this is relevant to the stress, safety, and staffing needs within these classrooms. Space is also a problem. While staff were remote, spaces have been repurposed either by staff in the districts where we are hosted or by SASA to create spaces for therapies and intensives. The issue is now the unwinding of this structure. We asked district administrators on Friday during the weekly meeting to review if SASA spaces are being used by their staff and to anticipate our use of those spaces. We are also looking for additional spaces within buildings, for example, if we return in-person students to a classroom in the afternoon. The students receiving therapy or intensives in that classroom are now displaced, and we have to find another location. Schedules, another problem they're having. As districts and SASA programs are pivoting to an increase for in-person learning, the schedules for related services are changing again. This impacts how we can staff a classroom to return students in person. It's also just another complex set of changes. Those are being planned for and adjusted as we become aware of the status changes. And then there is staff stress and burnout. Times are really tough. There is a lot of compassion fatigue among the administrators. Staff are exhausted and stressed out. Many are dealing with their own personal stressors, both students and staff. We are offering trivia games to keep staff connected, providing reminders about self-care and the EAP program, and writing notes of encouragement to staff. This unprecedented year is taking an unprecedented toll on all of the staff. So we're going to encourage us all to take a little time off on our spring break and step away from the work and refresh. I just thought I'd share that with, we have problems here, but SASA does too, and they're cooperative. So.
Thank you, Tara. Tara?
All right. The foundation, we are working on what we're going to do for Teacher Appreciation Week, which is, I believe it's the first week in May. So we're going to be doing something special for our teachers and staff. And the deadline for teacher grants is April 15th. So if any of the teachers need to get some things going for the next year, be sure and turn in some teacher grants. And then I wanted to thank everyone who participated in Pizza Wars this year. It did better than we thought. I don't want to give you any numbers right now because there's still things coming in and that, but next month I will let you know what we did. But it was different. I hope you all participated and purchased some pizza from some of our vendors. And there were coupons and all kinds of things. And then a lot of you donated to the foundation. We really appreciate that because it turns around in these teacher grants that we're going to be granting, it pays for those. So, and what we're going to do for the teachers and staff for Appreciation Week. We really thank everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So that's all I have.
Thanks, Terry. Mike?
The DuPage Division's spring meeting's virtual this Saturday at 10 a.m. I won't be able to attend, though. I'm going to be otherwise detained.
Okay. Other than that, we have 2 upcoming board meetings. April 12th, we'll have a workshop meeting at 6:30 p.m. And April 19th, a regular business meeting also at 6:30 p.m. Did you have something you wanted to say? No. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, with that, we need a call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Terry and Mike. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.